Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome back. You're watching I-24 News. We're coming to you live from Tel Aviv on this day 25 of Israel's war with Hamas. Israel is at war in both the south, around and inside Gaza, and on its northern front against Palestinian groups and the Iranian-backed terrorist organization Hezbollah. Well, a barrage of rockets was fired from Gaza at central and southern Israel this afternoon and this evening. In Ashdod, three people injured, one of them seriously after shrapnel fell after one of the rockets was intercepted. There's fierce clashes continuing inside Gaza between IDF forces and Hamas terrorists. Tragically, the IDF says 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in the fighting. Meanwhile, Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels claimed responsibility for a rocket they fired at the Red Sea city of Eilat earlier. That was intercepted, and the number of hostages being held in Gaza has been revised upwards. It now stands at 240. Let me introduce to you our studio guests this hour, Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria. He's the former deputy head of assessment at the Israeli military intelligence and former foreign policy advisor to the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Great to see you as always, Jacques. Also with us, Ambassador Yoram Ettinger. He's the former Israeli ambassador and congressional affairs liaison at the Israeli embassy in DC, and an expert on regional politics as well. Great to have you with us, both of you. So let's talk then about the latest fighting. Tragically, Jacques, 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed, and as we have been told repeatedly, most recently by Tzachi Hanegbi, the National Security Chairman, tonight, this will be a long and costly war for Israel.
Well, yes, and I think that the price of what Tzachi Hanegbi has been alluding is not exactly 2 soldiers killed. So let's wait for the IDF spokesman and hear what happened yesterday in the Gaza Strip. As far as we are talking about an urban warfare. Urban warfare demands first lots of personnel, lots of military people, lots of the units involved, and it has to be, very gradual. You have to just eliminate every presence of enemy, be it in every building, in every story, in every elevator, in every yard. You have to advance very easily and be careful not to fall into ambushes and not to fall on minefield and not to fall under the fire of snipers. So this is very, very, very demanding. And we know from past experience, certainly in Iraq, for instance, the Mosul Mosul battle demanded a heavy toll on the Allies. More than 1,000 soldiers were killed there, and I'm not talking about the Daesh. Daesh had in the thousands were killed, and we are facing here a very special situation where most our enemy is underground, the Gaza city, fighting in tunnels, this is a real challenge that we have. Right now, I can say that more or less we can understand from what's happening on the ground what is how the IDF is conducting its war in Gaza. There's two main thrusts into Gaza, one in the northern part and one south of Gaza City, meaning to just chop the Gaza Strip in 3: the north, the center, and the south, where most of the Palestinians have found refuge in the camps, and starting a siege on Gaza City after we finish with the northern border. And according to Tzachi Hanegbi, the National Security Advisor, most of the area in the north has been lost to the control of Hamas, and certainly
it's under Israeli control.
And it's under Israeli control, and Israel is pouring inside more and more units in order to prepare for a second effort south of the Gaza city.
Yeah, an awful lot of military challenges facing the Israeli forces, the tunnels, the hostage situation, and all the while the international community breathing down Israel's neck, trying to get it to agree to a ceasefire. Some in the international community, not all.
Well, first and foremost, we should realize there are no free lunches, especially in the Middle East. And if you want to maintain your independence, you have to pay a price. At the same time, the last thing that we should do is subordinate our national security to international public opinion. International public opinion has not been ally of Israel, and we should stick to our requirements, and more than that, we have to resurrect, to restore our posture of deterrence, which was injured gravely on October 7. And in order to resurrect the posture of deterrence, we have literally to obliterate Hamas political infrastructure and military infrastructure. Anything less than that is not going to restore our posture of deterrence, which is a precondition not only for our national security at large, it's a precondition for expanded cooperation with the U.S. The U.S. cooperates with Israel because of our posture of deterrence. Saudi Arabia is interested in expanded ties with Israel because of our posture of deterrence, and the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan and the Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco and Southern Sudan are all byproduct primarily of Israel's posture of deterrence, and Israel's posture of deterrence on the one hand and international public opinion on the other hand basically are contradiction in terms.
Okay, all right. We'll pick up on those points in a moment, but I want to bring in what's happening in the north. Our correspondent Mary McAuliffe is at the border with Lebanon. Mary, some developments in the last hour. We can see a fire blazing behind you, I believe.
That's absolutely right, Laura. So this is an observation post that we've been talking about really for weeks now as we continue to see Israel and Hezbollah trading forces across the border. But we've been here the past few days and we continue to see just mortars and rockets being fired at this observation post. It's an Israeli military post. Normally I wouldn't point out an Israeli military post, but Hezbollah in recent weeks has been repeatedly showing visuals of these surveillance posts saying that they've successfully taken out a number of different Israeli military infrastructure on the border. The IDF, for its part, has not commented on any damage to its facilities. Of course, we've had injuries. We've had deaths among Israeli soldiers, as well as deaths among Hezbollah fighters, almost as many as 50 Hezbollah fighters who've been killed in this latest round of violence. But we just continue to see these cross-border raids, cross-border attacks between the two exchanging fire here.
So the fire we're seeing there is inside Israel, to be clear?
That's right. So this is a border right behind the hill. It's hard to see in the darkness. I know this is a hill that lies on the Israel-Lebanon border. Just beyond that hill is Lebanese territory. So it's also the border post of Rosh Hanikra, just further to the left of that fire. And so this is an area that we've routinely seen hit by mortar attacks by different means as the disposal of Hezbollah to try and target Israeli infrastructure along the border. But it's absolutely inside Israeli territory, but it's not an area that most civilians could go to. This is part of a military area. This border, of course, very heavily guarded, a very heavy military area where most civilians aren't allowed to go, and the communities just outside of it, of course, have already been evacuated, as we've just seen weeks of different attacks, rockets, mortars into Israeli communities, as well as attempted anti-tank missile attacks. The IDF today said it had launched an attack against a cell that they said were planning to launch anti-tank missiles against Israeli forces, and that they already had earlier in the day launched an attack on 2 different Israeli outposts along the border. That's also in addition to rockets that were fired fired at the northern Israeli community of Metula. That's just really in the northern part of Israel. But Israel says those rockets landed inside Lebanese territory and nobody was injured on the Israeli side of the border.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mary. Mary McAuliffe there in the north of Israel. And we saw, Jacques, that fire blazing behind Mary. The IDF hasn't confirmed exactly what happened. But just to pick up on Yoram's point about deterrence, I mean, how is the deterrence working in the north?
Well, it is working. It is working. The fact is that till now Hezbollah has not dared the fire beyond the range of 5 kilometers inside Israeli territory. This is one thing. Second thing that we haven't seen a ground attack carried out by the Radwan units. So much feared that they would try to jump over the obstacle and just get hold of all localities. Just exactly what happened in Gaza. The thing is that there is some success that Hezbollah can look at by saying, okay, we have forced Israel to evacuate all its inhabitants along the border. We have asked, we have, because of our standing and our steadfastness, Israel has been compelled to direct some of its troops, or most half of its troops that were mobilized into the northern area, and in doing so, we have assisted Hamas. Even though we are not very happy about what Hamas did, Hamas surprised us. Hamas did not coordinate the timing of the attack against Israel with us. Had they coordinated the attack, we would be right now fighting in Safad. We would be fighting maybe in Haifa. We would be. I mean, the surprise would have been total completely. So right now, when Hezbollah, after 3 weeks of fighting with Israel, intermittent fighting over the border, he's really a loser. He has a riddle that he is not succeeding to solve. How to attack the Israeli system of defense? Every cell that he is pushing forwards has been intercepted and killed. Most of his anti-tank missile squads have been eliminated either by direct fire or by drones. So he has more than 60 fighters of anti-tank missiles. This is a huge quantity in Hezbollah's armament, and it's very important for him to see how he continues the fighting with Israel. So we have to wait on Friday to hear what His Excellency, His Sanctity, Mr. Hassan Nasrallah, would tell us.
In a tunnel.
What is he going to tell? And in my view, he is going to. I mean, this is the day in commemoration of the 60 Hezbollah terrorists who were sent on the road to Jerusalem. So by the time he begins his talking on Friday, I hope that 60 more would have joined that. And he will say very plainly that he has 100,000 of these people ready to do the same.
What do you make of Hezbollah's actions so far? I mean, if we go right back to just after the attacks, they were warning, weren't they? We are ready to respond to any Israeli aggression. That's what they said, and they have said that they are ready to join the war. Do you think they've been surprised by the level of American support which has flooded to Israel?
Well, in my opinion, we should not underestimate the sophistication of Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north, but equally important, we should not underestimate the capability to absorb Israeli bombing. We're talking about an apocalyptic enemy. This is not an enemy that shies away from martyrdom, especially Hezbollah, the Shiites. It goes back to the 7th century, the Karbala battle, which until this very day has become a role model for martyrdom. My own lesson is that we should have done it long time ago, namely not to put emphasis on defense but on offense, and to shy away from reaction and preempt. And the same goes for both Hezbollah and Hamas. There was an illusion in Israel, very self-destructive illusion, that we buy quiet on the border for quiet inside Israel. We never had quiet with Hamas and Hezbollah. We provided them with time to upgrade their capabilities, and we must not repeat that mistake, not with Hezbollah and not with Hamas.
So would you like to see the IDF respond more forcefully to the provocations by Hezbollah and the attacks by Hezbollah?
As I said, any day we do not preempt is a net gain for Hezbollah. I'm aware of the price of fighting on both fronts, but that's the Middle East, and that's the reality of Israel. And the question is, hitting Hezbollah today in a preemptive manner on our watch would cause, certainly would have a toll, but working on their watch would have dramatically higher toll than preempting their attack.
Do you agree with that?
I quite agree with the idea of preempting, that the problem is that we lost the momentum. We lost the momentum because, I mean, several times the Israeli press reported that our Minister of Defense had planned, and the military establishment had planned, a preemptive attack on Hezbollah missiles in Lebanon. And our Prime Minister, because responding to an American pressure, said no.
The Americans don't want Israel.
Don't want the conflict to expand into a regional conflict. This is why I said no. Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, the don't was also directed again towards Israel. So this is one thing that we have to remember. So there is no surprise. There is no surprise, and certainly Hezbollah has prepared himself in order to, I mean, to accept the strike from Israel and to respond in consequence. But I would like to go back to the deterrence idea. I remember very well, and since I follow Hezbollah for a long time, that the declaration of Nasrallah were that if Israel would trespass a red line, meaning that they begin a ground offensive, then we will respond in kind. We have been there for more than 3 days, and we are waiting for His Excellency, His Sanctity, in order to see what how he will respond.
We should wait to hear what he has to say on Friday.
Yes.
Okay, but so far no major escalation, you say, from Hezbollah. All right, let's go back to the south then to find out what's happening there. Our correspondent Pia Steckelbach is in the south, and Pia, tragically we've got the news that 2 IDF soldiers have been killed in the latest fighting.
Right, Laura, the IDF confirming that 2 soldiers were killed inside Gaza, possibly last night, and 2 others are severely injured here as the Israeli military is intensifying its ground incursion into Gaza. Fighting has been taking place on the ground here behind me in Gaza throughout the day. The Israeli army saying that they have targeted squads who were on their way to launch anti-tank missiles and also several targets belonging to Hamas. We're also hearing that a couple of hours ago an airstrike that is attributed to Israel targeted the Jabalia refugee camp. The numbers of victims and of killed vary from 100 to 400 according to sources in Gaza. The IDF is saying that this incident is under investigation, not providing any further details at this moment. Another incident happening in the neighborhood of Nusayrat, a bit further down south here, where a building was targeted, also killing dozens of people. That is what's coming out of Gaza at this moment. We're talking about northern Gaza, and the Israeli army has been continuously called upon people to evacuate that area and to move further down south. But we do know that not everyone has been following that call. An estimator more than 1 million people have been displaced so far, but there are still civilians in northern Gaza there, and that strike on that refugee camp really showing that civilians are being caught in that fighting here as the Israeli army is intensifying its strikes in Gaza from the air. And we've been hearing that really all throughout the evening. We're hearing Israeli aircrafts, helicopters, planes, as well as the artillery here targeting targets inside Gaza. We're here standing in front, basically only a few hundred meters away from northern Gaza, from the neighborhood of Bet Hanun there, and we're hearing the Israeli strikes, and we're also seeing the rockets coming from the Gaza Strip targeting cities in Israel. Just the latest barrage targeting central Israel. We've been seeing how these rockets were coming out of the Gaza Strip targeting Tel Aviv and the surrounding cities there. As I said, the Israeli army seems to be intensifying their strikes on Gaza. That's what we've been witnessing here on the ground, also with our eyes and with our ears as really the booms are intensifying from artillery and the airstrikes. Thank
you very much, Pia. And Pia Steckelberg there. And we should point out, of course, any information coming out of Gaza is from Hamas. Hamas controls Gaza. So
I would very much advise to stop quoting the Palestinian sources. What is the number? 100 or 400? Really? I mean, this is something incredible. We are being, the spokesman of Hamas. This is something that I cannot accept.
Well, Pia is quoting figures.
I hope so. That we have to underline and to stress the fact that this is Palestinian sources and not confirmed at all.
But there will obviously be civilian casualties.
There are casualties in every war. In every war, we have casualties also. But we have to just check our numbers.
As we always point out,
we saw with the hospital, 500 were killed in 5 minutes. We know the 500, and then we realized that there were barely a few dozens.
Yeah.
And in the parking, and not at the hospital, and it was a misfire by the Islamic Jihad.
We at I24 News consistently point out that any numbers coming out of Gaza are Hamas numbers. Hamas controls Gaza, and no numbers coming out of Gaza can be verified. Yoram, I want to talk a bit about the international situation, given your experience as a former ambassador. There was a Senate committee hearing today, and the FBI Director Christopher Wray said that Hamas now poses the greatest threat to U.S. domestic security since ISIS. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the war of Israel against Hamas is the war of the West against Islamic terrorism, and Israel is, in this case, a line of defense for the West. Neither Hamas nor Hezbollah or Iran consider Israel their utmost target. Their utmost target is to install Islam as the only religion, only legitimate religion in the world. They want to bring the so-called infidel West to submission. In that regard, Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran have expanded their ties with the drug cartels in Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Brazil. Part of that collaboration has been training by Hezbollah and Hamas of the drug cartels in car bombing, which they expect and they try to bring to the U.S. mainland as well. We're talking about the Iranians exporting to the drug cartels machinery to construct underground tunnels in order to infiltrate the U.S. from Mexico. And therefore, the current statement by the FBI director is nothing new. It has been going on for a few decades for simple reason. Islamic terrorism considers Central America to be the soft underbelly of the United States, and the United States is the #1 enemy.
And we've got that border, of course, where lots of apparently many Iranians are getting through. Talking about countries further afield, according to China, Israel is no longer on the map. Leading online digital maps from Baidu and Alibaba don't name Israel or the Palestinian territories, but cities and borders and nearby countries are clearly named, like Cyprus, for example, and Lebanon. Well, Beijing has in the past reacted with fury over maps, which it says do not reflect its territorial integrity over its own disputed areas. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined now on the line by Yuval Weinreb. Yuval, you're a China expert. I'm sorry, I haven't been told the name of your organization. Tell me the name of your organization, if you would.
I'm with Crystal 8.
Crystal 8.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to have you with us. Thank you so much. Tell us then, what is going on with China? Is this a recent change? Is this since October 7th, or is this a long-term policy?
So there was an outroar about this in the last couple of days. And I first noticed this when I was told about it 3 days ago. But from everything that I researched, I see no clear evidence that this is something that happened recently, but it's definitely happening. I mean, you definitely don't see Israel's name on the map. What's more, the borders that are marked on the map are not the borders of the ceasefire in 1949, the so-called Green Line in Israel, but they are the borders of the UN resolution from 1947 that Israel accepted and the Arabs, of course, rejected, and that started the independence war. So China is not only not naming Israel, but it's also providing some kind of deceiving information as to what are the actual borders that are in dispute.
Oh, okay. So China going back in time with its history lessons. Okay. Well, what is Beijing's official position then on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
So their official position, we have to say, has not changed much since the foundation of the People's Republic of China. They support the Palestinian cause. Since the foundation of the Israel-China official diplomatic ties, they've changed and nuanced it a bit, and they do support the two-state solution officially, based on the 1967 line that, again, they don't really follow right now on the map. But they still clearly support the Palestinian cause due to a large amount of interest that I can elaborate on if we have time.
Sure, go ahead.
So first of all, historically, let's say China's position was based on its so-called anti-imperialistic stance, and they're seeing of Israel as kind of a proxy of the U.S., which is their imperial enemy, we can say. And that is the historical and so-called ideological reasons. But actually, there's many more reasons that are just pure economic and diplomatic interests. China imports most of its energy resources, fuel and oil, natural gas and oil from the Middle East and from Arab countries. China invests vast amounts of money in different projects throughout the Middle East and in other Muslim and Arab countries. And of course, there are 50-something Arab and Muslim countries in the world, whereas there is only one Jewish state, and that really helps China in the international organizations to make sure that they're voting according to the China preference. And for example, you can see that clearly on Xinjiang, where there are no, all the Muslim and Arab countries are in an outcry now for the Palestinian justice, but you don't see any of them speaking about Xinjiang, let alone voting about anything against it. So that goes hand in hand. There's a combination of interest here, and all of that, of course, is tied to China's strategic goal, which is to increase its international influence and basically provide an alternative or counter to the U.S. Global leadership. So this is what drives China into these actions and to their stand on the Palestinian cause. Specifically on this in this war, it was really outrageous because
So China basically doing what Iran has been trying to do for many years now, wiping Israel off the map. Not physically, but on its maps anyway. We have to leave it there, Yuval, but thank you. We appreciate it. Yuval Weiner over there at Crystal 8. Thank you. Thanks very much. Interesting. All right, we're going to take a very short break. Do stay with us. We'll be back with all the very latest right after this. Don't go away.
את המיגון החרישי של השדה.
We have our future and we'll be victorious. How are we going to do this? I don't know, but and we need to.
Israel is officially in a state of war.
This is a very active scene, and we need to get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
Help us, we don't know what to do. We just don't know anything.
Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
Welcome back. You're watching I24 News. We're coming to you live from Tel Aviv on this day 25 of Israel's war with Hamas. Israel, remember, still at war in both the south, both around and inside Gaza, and on its northern front against Palestinian groups and the Iranian-backed terrorist group Hezbollah. A barrage of rockets were fired from Gaza at central and southern Israel this afternoon, with reports of a direct hit. With reports of injuries, I should say, in Ashdod. At least 3 people injured, one of them seriously, when a rocket was intercepted overhead. They were injured by shrapnel, just to be clear about that. Fierce clashes continue inside Gaza between IDF forces and Hamas terrorists. The IDF has confirmed that 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed, 2 others have been seriously wounded. Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have declared war on Israel and have claimed responsibility for a rocket that was fired at the Red Sea city of Eilat earlier today. Meanwhile, the number of hostages being held inside Gaza has been revised upwards and now stands at 240. That includes babies, young children, women and elderly people as well. All of them still being held by terrorists inside Gaza. Their families enduring an agony now for 25 days. With me in the studio, Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria is the former Deputy Head of Assessment at the Israeli Military Intelligence and a former Foreign Policy Advisor to the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Ambassador Yoram Ettinger is the former Israeli Ambassador and Congressional Affairs Liaison at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C. Thank you to you both. So we were just having a discussion earlier, because part of the pressure on Israel, of course, is to really reduce as much as possible the number of innocent civilian lives being lost in Gaza.
Yes, well, we are not interested in creating a humanitarian crisis. We are conducting a war according to the laws of war, the international accepted laws of war. We are not carpet bombing that the Americans have done in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We are not using neutron bombs that can annihilate thousands of people at a time. We are not conducting a war like the Russians in Afghanistan or the Americans in Iraq. We are trying to be very specific, very surgical. And it has a price. It has a price because we are paying the price. Instead of bombing, carpet bombing, and advancing rapidly, we have to go and fight our way, building after building, house after house, and yard after yard. And this will cost us a lot of lives. And this is a price, a heavy price that we have to pay in order to continue and conduct ourselves according to the laws of war. And we should be proud of ourselves ourselves, because really this is, I believe that we are one of the best armies in the world that conducts itself according to the rules of war as they have been pronounced at the Geneva Convention. So this is something that we have to take into consideration, and we are facing disinformation. We are facing a wave, a tsunami of disinformation that and of course the sympathy or empathy that the world has towards what is considered to be David, and David is the Palestinians. Now, believe me, the ambassador, I think, has said earlier about where we live here. We are living in a very bad neighborhood. If we stop tomorrow fighting and we accept the ceasefire, you will see all those who are now crying and suffering and saying we are suffering, we don't have food, we don't have nothing. They will go in the streets waving high, their hands and applauding the exploit of Hamas, throwing flowers and sweets at Hamas, the terrorists, and they would just chant very, very highly about their victory.
There are also many Palestinian civilians who have suffered under Hamas as well, we should point out.
Well, they have voted for Hamas, and they have chosen their government. Yeah. So you must assume, and then allow me, on the 7th of October, after the first wave of Hamas terrorists invading Israel, who came and just looted the whole kibbutzim? Who came there?
But
only the people of Gaza.
There are no innocent lives.
Thousands of them. They were the ones who were just to butcher the people. They're living there, who captivated people and took them back.
But we have to be clear. There are also innocents in Gaza who did not want Hamas and who have hopefully moved to the south.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. You say that the Palestinian people in Gaza are not Hamas. I say yes, they are Hamas. They have voted Hamas. They have voted Hamas in 2007.
It's more than voted Hamas. We're talking about people in Gaza and Judea and Samaria that have gone through hate education, K through 12, since 1993. Namely, we're talking about almost 2 generations that have been urged by their education system, by the Friday sermons in the mosque, to commit suicide or martyrdom for the sake of Allah, for the sake of holy war against the infidel Jews, and therefore the attempt to separate Hamas from the bulk of the population is, in my mind, oversimplification.
Okay, but it is untrue to say there are no innocent people in Gaza. I think we need to make that clear, and Israel is doing everything it can to protect innocent life. We heard earlier from the National Security Council Chairman Zaki Hanegbi. He spoke about the progress of the campaign inside Gaza, and he also spoke about Egypt's concern that displaced people from Gaza will rush the Rafah crossing if it's opened.
The phase that is being carried out at this time is the phase of the ground activity that is taking place in the northern Gaza Strip. It is hard fighting. It involves fierce fighting. There's no fighting without a painful price. We are a warrior nation. We are determined, despite the pain, to win. Another supreme goal, as the Prime Minister defined, is to create conditions for the return of the kidnapped to their families. This is our sacred commitment as a nation to our citizens and soldiers. As revealed yesterday, the military move serves both the effort to return the kidnapped and the pursuit to destroy the enemy's military and governmental capabilities. Egypt is our friend. It has been with us in peace for decades. We understand that it is very important for her to prevent an influx of displaced Palestinians from the Strip. We are in dialogue with them. I am in dialogue with my counterparts in Egypt. It is important to us that even if this is what they are afraid of, that treatment will still be given to the wounded in the hospitals. There is a large hospital in Rafah, on the Egyptian side of the border. There is a possibility to establish field hospitals on the border of Gaza and Egypt. There are many things with which Egypt can assist those uninvolved citizens. This is our common interest.
Zaki Hanegbi, the National Security Advisor, talking about Israel needing to work with Egypt to solve the humanitarian crisis.
I think that this was a very bad advice given to the Palestinians to go and settle in the Sinai. This is totally wrong. Egypt.
But that wasn't the advice of Israel.
No, this was the advice of one of the IDF spokesmen the first week of the war, asking the Palestinians to move from north to south and to go into Sinai.
It's from a body which doesn't have any powers. It's an advisory body. It was one source who
one source who said, and I think that this was read in Egypt and was criticized from the very beginning, and it became an issue. Whereas we don't have an issue with the Egyptians. We want them to treat the wounded in El Arish, for instance, where El Arish is being used as an airport to channel
Egyptian territory.
To channel aid, international aid into the territory. And by the way, about what I said earlier about the Hamas, I think that Hamas is doing a very bad thing to its own people. They are just sacrificing their own people. They're so cynically, they are using them as human shields, and this is wrong. This is totally wrong. And we see all those who have been hit and killed, and this is only because Hamas is there doing what else. They looted warehouses of the UNRWA. Why? Because they don't have food. Who's controlling that? Hamas. And so we have to remember that against whom we are fighting. We are fighting about brutal, bestial people, monsters, as our Prime Minister said.
Hamas, yeah. Okay. Well, there are concerns about how a drawn-out conflict could impact Israel's economy in the long term. Some 300 economists wrote a letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urging him to reassess his economic priorities. We're joining us now. Professor Niron Hashai is a dean at the Arison School of Business at Reichman University. Thank you very much for joining us, Niron. So would you say you agree with those economists? Does the government need to reassess its priorities when it comes to the economy?
I guess so. Our estimation says that both in 2023 and 2024, there will be an extra cost for the war of around, a rough figure of $50 billion. And currently, the budget, does not include these costs. And even worse, most of the budget is currently so sank into coalition purposes rather than to promote economic and growth factors. So in this situation of, where the Israeli economy has experienced a very significant shock, I think I'm one of these guys that signed, one of the professors that signed the letter. This is something that the government has to do and has to do quickly. I emphasize very, very quickly because time is of the essence.
Well, the foreign minister's outlined a $1 billion rescue plan for businesses who are hurting from the fact, you've got so many reservists who've had to go and fight, the people can't operate their businesses. Do you think that's enough, or is that going to have to be a lot more?
I think it's a lot more. The numbers that I gave you are, if I'm taking into account the extra security budget that will surely we will need to increase it by a third. Renovation costs of all the area of in the south. All the economic costs, those who are now at the leave of absence, etc., etc. The things that have been done are in the right direction. I agree, but it's like a drop in the ocean. Much more needs to be done. Some of the money exists, and this is why I think we signed a letter saying, yes, the Israeli, the government budget will, the deficit will definitely increase, but still you can resolve some of the issues by simply directing funds from one cause to a much more urgent one.
We've seen a lot of aid coming from outside, lots of private donations, for example. Is that helping the economy?
Of course it does. So estimations are that instead of a deficit of around 5%, this could decrease the deficit to 4%, which is good, but it's still much more than we expected. We are expecting that on a per capital income, Israel will experience a negative growth in gross domestic product. So, we expect like 1%, even less, depending how the war will evolve. Growth, and this is very far from the 3+% of growth that Israel has experienced. So, of course, the aid, mainly from the U.S. and some donations, is helping a lot. We should not, we should be appreciative. This is important, but still, the Israeli economy is getting into a very uncertain period. We have to remember that we do not really know how the war will evolve, and different scenarios of the war will differently affect the Israeli economy.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, Israel's defense and high-tech industries are kind of the backbone of the economy here. I mean, how are they being impacted by the war?
So, we say always that wars are good for the defense economy, and certainly the war between Russia and Ukraine has been good to our defense economy. So I think this, in the short run, of course, it's good for the defense economy. I think it's less promising for the high-tech industry. And I'm not really talking about brain drain. I think it will take quite a lot for Israeli programmers, technicians, scientists, etc., to leave Israel, the high-tech geeks, etc., and all the companies. The problem will actually be, I think, in investor confidence. And, Israel already witnessed a shock in investor confidence following the judicial reform. And I think this will get worse now, again, depending on how the war will evolve, when it is a country that, you have rockets in Tel Aviv, etc.
Yeah, investors don't like uncertainty, do they? That's for sure. Dr. Niron Hashai, we appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yes, Yoram Ettinger, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, one should be aware that this is not the first and this is not the worst crisis ever experienced by Israel. If we go back 1973 war, many Israelis assumed that we were on the verge of extinction, and they spoke about a crashed economy, crashed morale. We bounced back pretty rapidly to new heights. As we talk here, Israel enjoys unprecedented level of foreign exchange reserve, over $200 billion, which would enable Israel to overcome the most severe crisis. We're talking about our defense industry, which I was alluded to. We are talking about an all-time high defense export by Israel, and we're talking about a potential 10 or 14 billion special package of aid, defense aid by the U.S. to Israel, because the U.S. realizes that Israel is an irreplaceable ally in the Middle East. They know that they have to maintain Israel's posture of deterrence for the sake of America's own interests. And certainly, when we get the special package from the U.S., this would enable Israel to divert funds from defense to our civilian infrastructures.
So you're not too concerned about the long-term outlook for the economy. Well, let's turn to another issue now, a very worrying one, because from Stars of David scrawled on the homes of Jewish people in Paris to cries of "Gas the Jews" and that famous one "From the river to the sea" being yelled on university campuses, there has been a massive uptick in anti-Semitic abuse around the world. The White House announced today a range of measures aimed at tackling anti-Semitism on university campuses. Well, my next guest has been part of efforts to reassure Jewish students in New York State. Rabbi Mark Schneier, president of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding. Welcome. Great to have you back with us. We've seen shocking scenes, haven't we, over the past 2 weeks, mainly from university campuses. I mean, are these institutions still safe for Jews?
They are safe for Jews, but we have launched an initiative of Imam Shamsi, Ali and I. The Imam is virtually the chief Imam of New York, and I, to address different Hillels on college campuses and Muslim student associations, reminding them that, yes, we cherish American values and freedoms of protest and demonstrations, but you cannot cross the line when it comes to violence, confrontation, intimidation. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that my working closely with Chancellor Rodriguez at the City University of New York, which is the largest urban university in the world, we need to realize that the universities can also only do so much, and why it's incumbent upon us reaching out to Muslim leaders to begin addressing the youth of the American Muslim community in terms of conveying the message that we are now conveying on college campuses.
Yeah, we're just looking at pictures of you now sitting alongside an imam, and you were both kind of delivering a message of peace to people. But it's interesting, isn't it, Mark, because, you know, you hear from Egyptian Americans, Lebanese Americans, Iraqi Americans. They seem to kind of have a, you know, not only a better grasp of history and what happened in the region, but you certainly don't see them joining chants for Israel to be destroyed. It seems to be the younger generation. Bizarrely, some of them are Jewish themselves, and they just don't seem to have any grasp of history. They don't seem to know, you know, how Israel was here, you know, what the region looked like, about the Ottoman Empire or anything. There seems to be something, you know, problematic with the education system on these university campuses.
You're spot on, but I often say that if people fight for their own rights are only as honorable as when they fight for the rights of all people. Why we must challenge American Muslim leaders to help protect and defend Jewish students on college campuses. When President Trump initiated the anti-Muslim ban that impacted on Muslims across the country, the #1 champion of the American Muslim community was the American Jewish community, particularly myself. Well, now is the time that we need American Muslim leaders to help defend, protect Jewish students. And it's time for them to rise to the fore because, you know, the door swings both ways. There needs to be quid pro quo. And that's been my message, you know, that I've delivered these past few weeks, you know, across the Muslim world. You know, for example, my visit 2 weeks ago to Kazakhstan, which is the grand prize of Muslim nations in Central Asia, had a very, very lukewarm statement after the Hamas massacre. And I sat down with the leadership, reminding them that Hamas is not only laser focused on the destruction of Israel, it's hell-bent on destroying the Jewish people. And the very next morning, President Tokayev issued a statement unequivocally condemning Hamas for its barbarism, for its savagery. We need to break out Hamas from this Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to call Hamas for what it is.
Well, I don't know if you know her. I interviewed Dalia Al-Akidi. She's running to unseat Ilhan Omar in Minnesota, and part of the squad, you know, have been termed the pro-Hamas caucus in recent days. And she was talking about, you know, when you had immigration from the Muslim world in the 70s, people wanted to get away from those systems of governance, and they wanted to live in a free country, whereas you've got more recently immigrants who are bringing those cultures and those customs with them. Do you see that as part of the problem?
Look, I'm afraid that nothing is going to change in terms of this new dynamic of anti-Semitism until Muslim leaders begin to assume some responsibility, whether it's here in the United States, whether it's countries like UAE, Bahrain, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. They need to stand up to defend and protect the Jewish people. This is not an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is not a conflict between Israel and the greater Muslim and Arab community. No, as President Biden said, this is a war between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And we cannot do this without having allies within the greater Muslim and Arab community.
Well, talking about those allies, of course, Rabbi, you have close ties, don't you, with high-level officials in the Gulf states. What have they been telling you, and do they still want to pursue cooperation with Israel?
Oh, there is no question they want to pursue cooperation. Saudi Arabia is just on pause, but we're trying to get them to the next step. You know, after the massacre, UAE and Bahrain did condemn Hamas, but we need to maintain that momentum, whether it's in the Gulf, whether it's in Central Asia. We have to let people know what Hamas is and what they represent.
Rabbi Mark Schneier, great to talk to you. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed, and all the best with your efforts.
Thank you for having me.
Important work you do. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's tragic, isn't it? I don't know about you, Jacques. I saw the scenes from Paris today. Stars of David drawn on people's homes to identify where Jewish people are living. People are having to tear down their mezuzahs from outside their door. A very real risk to Jews around the world right now.
Well, unfortunately, this is not new in France. I mean, I've been visiting France in the past several years, and every time I was just stunned by the fact that the levels of anti-Semitism has grown and grown and grown, and people would just define their attitude towards Israel as an attitude towards Judaism, and this is how they understand Israel is being identified with the Jews abroad, and the Jews abroad are being identified as pro-Israelis, all of them, even though there are some that are against Israel. And basically you could see all over France, and certainly in Paris and several areas, that real expressions of anti-Semitism. I mean, we had
not just Paris, Lyon, Marseille.
Yeah, and we had in Toulouse the attack against the synagogue. We had in Paris, I mean, in the surrounding of Paris, the cruel death of Mrs. Halimi and others. I mean, all over. Every now and then we have knowledge and notice of an act of a brutal act and a lynch that is conducted by Muslims in France against Jews.
Yeah, and the government seems to be struggling to get a hand on it.
Yes.
We've got a report now, because just days after the slaughter at the Supernova Music Festival, where 260 people at least were killed, survivors have found a rehabilitation centre. They're trying to get together and heal from the terrible trauma that they've been through. I-24 News correspondent Dikshir Arvind has this report.
Ronit Farm was established as a response to the attack that took place on October 7th after Hamas terrorists infiltrated into southern Israel, killing 1,400 people and taking over 240 hostages. Leah Naor, founder of the Rehabilitation Center, opened its doors for those who lived through and witnessed the horrors of the attack.
We opened this immediately, not knowing exactly what we're going to need. Within the first day, we had many psychologists and psychiatrists, and people came so frozen, and it was so hard for them to be verbal. So we had them sitting on pillows, and we had them doing reflexology or singing with the guitar, and slowly they opened up.
Within the first 2 weeks, the center was able to treat over 2,000 survivors of the attack. Ronit Farm aims to serve as a safe space for young survivors to talk about their trauma and encourages them to open up about their harrowing experience to psychologists and therapists. Surrounded by nature, the farm allows young people to recoup and recover in a relaxing setting.
It's hard. How do you carry on being normal after surviving one of the largest terror attacks in all of Israel?
Although survivors are seeking help to overcome the atrocities of the attack, it will not be forgotten.
After years and
all right,
years,
Jacques Neria and Yoram Ettinger, thank you very much to you both. We're going to end things there. Do stay tuned to I-24 News. Our live coverage continues. Khaled Ben David is with you next. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Israel is officially in a state of war.
This is a very active scene, and we need to get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
Help us, we don't know what to do. We just don't know anything.
Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
uns ein Video zugeschickt, wo ich eindeutig...
Je passe maintenant le micro.
As we speak, our soldiers are fighting on the battlefield, fighting with courage and heroism, engaging in fierce, close-quarter battles in which they are eliminating terrorists. This type of combat endangers our forces and carries a heavy price, and it is complex, but it is critical to achieve the objectives of the war.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 25 of Israel's war against Hamas as it continues its battles from the south to the north of the country. Now, the IDF's ground operation in Gaza intensified today, with heavy fighting reported between Israeli forces and Palestinian terrorists in the northern strip's urban areas. The IDF says dozens of terrorists have been killed. The Hamas-run Gaza ministry claims there has also been heavy civilian casualties. Israel, too, absorbing casualties. The IDF saying this evening that 2 soldiers, Staff Sergeants Roe Wolf and Levi Lipschitz, have fallen in battle. May their memories be a blessing. Heavy rocket fire today from Gaza into Israel, most intercepted by Iron Dome, but 4 people injured in Ashdod from direct hits. Exchanges of fire also continued along the northern border, with the IDF striking Hezbollah posts. The Iran-backed Lebanese terror movement says that nearly 50 of its fighters have been killed by Israeli fire. Another Iranian proxy, Yemen's Houthi rebels, launched missiles at Eilat that were downed for the first time by the Arrow air defense system. Now, just before IDF troops entered Gaza in force, the commanding officer of the Southern Command, Major General Yaron Finkelman, spoke to the soldiers going into battle. Here are those remarks.
תחנות פיקוד הדרום כאן קודקוד. אנחנו יוצאים למתקפה על החמאס וארגוני הטרור ברצועת עזה. מטרתנו היא אחת, ניצחון. לא משנה כמה תהיה ארוכה הלחימה, כמה קשה, אין תוצאה אחרת מלבד ניצחון. נילחם במקצועיות ובעוצמה לאור ערכי צה"ל עליהם חונכנו, ובראשם הדבקות במשימה והחתירה לניצחון. אנו נילחם בסמטאות, נילחם במנהרות, נילחם היכן שצריך, ונכה את האויב המתועב מולו אנו עומדים. אחי הלוחמים, התושבים של בארי, שדרות, ניר עוז, כפר עזה ויישובי מערב הנגב, ואיתם כל עם ישראל, כולם מביטים בנו כעת. כמוני, גם הם סומכים עליכם ומאמינים בכם. אתם דור הניצחון. כאן קודקוד, נו למשימותיכם, הכו באויב, סוף.
Going into battle. With us in studio, our senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman and Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital, the former commander of IDF Special Forces. And Doron, you know what it's like. Close combat, urban areas, face-to-face with the enemy. Israel has absorbed casualties. Give us a sense of what is happening now, what the soldiers are experiencing there in Gaza now.
First of all, I want to say that the words of Major General Finkelman, Yaron, I know him personally, speak for themselves, determination, with one goal in mind, victory. And I think by now we can say that the early stages of the campaign, the last few days and today, are working according to plan. We see a new, I wouldn't say a new, but a professional army, strong army, dedicated, very well-crafted plan, and very good intelligence that proved itself in the targeting, assassination, and the killing of 50 Hamas leaders. But this is the early stage. We have a long campaign ahead of us. But with what we see right now, we can get the confidence that the IDF is back on track and is going forward.
All right, I'm just going to jump down now to the south and our correspondent, Pia Steckelbach in Sderot. And Pia, give us a sense of what you're hearing down there. Some heavy fighting going on just across the border there in Gaza.
Right, Kalev, we've been hearing the sounds of the Israeli airstrikes all throughout the evening. Israeli airstrikes here only a few hundred meters behind us, lighting up the sky from time to time. We're also hearing the Israeli artillery targeting the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We've also been seeing the rockets being launched from the Gaza Strip towards central Israel there, that last barrage of rockets targeting Tel Aviv and the surrounding areas. We know that the fighting inside the Gaza Strip is intensifying on the ground. The Israeli army has just published this evening that 2 soldiers were killed in that fighting, 2 more seriously injured, and that the Israeli army has been heavily targeting the Jabalia neighborhood in the north of Gaza in an attempt to take out the Jabalia battalion commander who played a substantial role in the October 7th massacres. Within that operation, the neighborhood, the refugee camp of Jabalia, was also targeted. We are hearing about reports from dozens of people killed in that neighborhood. The Israeli army saying that they warned residents before that major strike, but that is an example of how civilians are being caught in the midst of that fire exchange as the Israeli strikes intensify from the air and also on the ground. The Israeli military has been calling upon civilians to leave the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but we do know that many civilians left to the south, then later came back as the humanitarian situation in the south was also dire and worsening day to day. And we do know that there are still many civilians in the north of the Gaza Strip, and that attack or that airstrike on the Jabalia neighborhood showed that, taking out about 50 Hamas members, according to the Israeli statement, and that significant commander there, but also leaving an yet unknown number of civilians dead in that attack.
All right, Pia Steckelbach and Sderot, that Jabalia commander, Ibrahim Beeri, supposedly played a major role in the October 7th massacre. Pia Steckelbach, thank you for that. Now, the National Security Advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, gave a briefing to journalists today. Here's what he said about the Gaza ground operation.
The phase that is being carried out at this time is the phase of the ground activity that is taking place in the northern Gaza Strip. It is hard fighting. It involves fierce fighting. There's no fighting without a painful price. We are a warrior nation. We are determined, despite the pain, to win. Another supreme goal, as the Prime Minister defined, is to create conditions for the return of the kidnapped to their families. This is our sacred commitment as a nation to our citizens and soldiers. As revealed yesterday, the military move serves both the effort to return the kidnapped and the pursuit to destroy the enemy's military and governmental capabilities.
No, when you were at that briefing by Tzachi and Egbe, some interesting points coming out of it. Give us your impression of the National Security Advisor on this, the day when really the battle entered a new stage, and we've got now Israeli casualties also that we've reported in the south.
A lot of headlines, a lot of important information. We'll start with this issue of Egypt, right, and the issue of fuel and the issue of hospitals and how they connect. As we all know, Israel's been under a lot of pressure internationally to allow the humanitarian aid and, excuse me, and especially to allow in fuel. And the Israeli government has stood steadfast against that. And what's the reason? Because the fuel, it says, first of all, it says the Israeli government's position is that there's enough fuel in the Gaza Strip. It's just being held by Hamas and hoarded by Hamas instead of being given to the civilians who should have use of it. It's being hoarded by Hamas. The international community essentially says that's all well and good, but at the same time, there are 2 million civilians living in Gaza, and the hospitals need fuel because there are obviously patients in the hospitals who need it. So Israel, it's incumbent upon you as a kind of last resort to be able at least to get enough fuel into the Gaza Strip to care for the patients in the hospital. What was the answer to that Tzachi and Egbe gave? He essentially said, what we propose is to take the patients out of the hospitals, to bring them over the border into Egypt and put them into a large hospital in Rafah on the Egyptian side, to put them into field hospitals that can be created on the Egyptian side, and even, Kalev, to put them on hospital ships that would come in from abroad, be docked offshore, probably on the Egyptian side for practical reasons, and then the patients would be cared for then, and that would take care of the issue of fuel, because the essential needs of fuel would be met by putting the fuel in those hospitals where the patients are, and it would take care of the patients themselves, and it would take care of the hospitals, because as we know, as the Israeli military has shown, Shifa Hospital, the main hospital in the Gaza Strip, is not only a hospital, and an actual hospital for civilians who need hospitalization, but it's also the main command center for Hamas. Hamas's Pentagon is inside the hospital.
Right, or underneath.
Or underneath, and inside, according to the military. Right. And so once the hospital were to be emptied, the military could then target the empty hospital / command center / Pentagon of Hamas, right, without harming the civilians who are there. It's a complicated plan, obviously. It would take cooperation from the Egyptians. But Negbi let on that, in terms of the ships at least, there's some implementation that's already started. But of course, the Egyptians are very, very worried about even letting critically injured Gazans over the border, an extreme position, even given their national security concerns. So one wonders whether this will get off the ground, but at least that's Israel's answer to the international community about how to manage the issue of fuel.
All right. I wonder if we could bring up this map we showed earlier of the Gaza Strip. It shows where some of the fighting is taking place. If we could bring that up. Okay, and I'm going to ask Doron, these are the main areas where we're hearing reports of fighting. Give us a sense, why these particular areas? What is the strategy or the tactic?
First of all, I said that the policy of the IDF since it started the ground campaign is to create as much fog of war as possible. Nothing gets out. So we just have clues here and there, some of them from reports of Palestinians. By the way, Hamas itself doesn't want reports to come out. It's an interesting predicament right now. So right now we are working basically in the refugee camps in the northern part of Gaza City, but there's also sighting in the Salah ad-Din in the south. So the question is whether we want to really put Gaza Strip on.
That's right. So that red line there is kind of the center of Gaza.
This is where we want
that's the line that Israel wants the civilians to go south of that red line on the map.
Some of them went, and this is where we want the in return aid to go, and not up north. But this is part of the logic of the campaign.
Right now, and in between those two green circles, which are these refugee camps, that's Gaza City. That is that dense area of
the heart of the problem, and the heart of the Gaza population, and the heart of Hamas, of course. The whole command structure, the tunnels, everything is there.
So so now that that we get some idea. As you said, Israel deliberately, for various reasons, keeping a tight lid on the information coming out of Gaza, including its tactics. But give us a sense how you think they might go now once they start going into Gaza City. What is the what are the tactics?
The complexity is clear to our audience, but the first 2 or 3 days until today were designed in order to create some basis for our forces from where to work. And now we are entering and closing in. So this is the next stage when you go to the margins of those places, but really entering the center, inching in. The main thing would be, of course, what would be the next stage entering in, and it's all based on our successes. How do we make the progress? What tunnels we discover? And intelligence. I think the intelligence lately works out very nice. We close a loop in a close way, in a very fast way between the ground forces, the aerial forces, and the location of the Hamas leaders. It's also vital in case, and this is where even Bibi Netanyahu discussed, the possibility of opportunities coming on the ground for meeting hostages and rescuing them.
As we saw the other day with Ori Megadish and her rescue.
This is possible because we shouldn't forget that all those hostages are scattered, different localities, not even the same organization. You don't know where they are, and who knows. We bet on this prospect, even if it looks sometimes slim, but it's a possibility. And of course, keeping the pressure on Hamas might be also a base from which to go to some negotiating a deal that right now doesn't seem really completely visible after the meeting in Qatar of the head of the Mossad, but it might come out along the way.
There is actually a flaw to that argument. We heard it from Hanegbi at the press conference. When we have time to go back to that, I'll explain.
Hanegbi really said, but I think this is part of the strategy. In the meantime, we don't see the other side participating in our plan.
All right, Jen. Okay, well, we've been going, we're discussing the south, but of course the firing also continued across the northern border today, and Israel very concerned that could flare up to a full-scale, much broader conflict, especially with Hezbollah in the north. Let's go to Mary McAuliffe in northern Israel. Mary, again, we see these actions throughout the day, this firing across. Hezbollah, again, taking some blows from the IDF and taking some losses from it.
That's absolutely right, Kalev. We continue to see these cross-border attacks between Israel and Hezbollah. Earlier today, rocket sirens rang out in Metula, this community in northern Israel. We did hear that those rockets landed inside Lebanese territory and did not cross over into Israeli territory. Important to remember, again, that Metula is one of the first communities that was evacuated since we began to see these attacks by Hezbollah into Lebanon. But Israel said it responded to the source of the fire, both from the rockets as well as an anti-tank missile that was fired twice at IDF spots along the border, as well as they also attacked another terror cell that they say were trying to fire these anti-tank missiles. But you can see behind me, I think maybe the smoke has gone down a little bit, but we still have this fire burning in the distance. This is a fire that's right along the Israel-Lebanon border, and this is an area that we've seen hit numerous times by Hezbollah in the past few weeks that we've been here, continuing to fire mortar shells and anti-tank missiles at Israeli infrastructure, military infrastructure that lies really along this border. So all that hill, beyond that hill where you can see that fire burning, that's Lebanese territory, and there are obviously a large number of Israeli military infrastructure right along that border, right along that hillside, continuing to watch and continuing to be on high alert as we continue to see these attacks by Hezbollah into Israeli territory, targeting not just civilians, but also Israeli soldiers and the bases that they've been stationed at.
All right, Mary McAuliffe there in northern Israel, just by the border with Lebanon. Thank you for that. Oh, and I was struck today, all of the Israeli figures that have spoken, Daniel Hagari, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, Tzachi Hanegbi, did speak about achievements, but also preparing the public for losses.
Oh, yeah.
And we do have today the first confirmation of 2 names that were released, as we gave early in the program. But clearly, it's getting ready for the public. The government already under pressure because of the situation of the hostages, and now is also going to have to deal with pressure once, of course, we see Israeli casualties in what, as Doron described, is going to be a very difficult, problematic operation.
Right. Well, first, we're expecting to hear from IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari shortly,
right.
and we'll bring at least part of that briefing to you here on I-24 News with a paraphrased translation. But Kalev, viewers outside of Israel need to understand how sensitive of an issue this is in Israeli society. The idea of casualties among soldiers. The IDF is a people's army. remember, there is a mandatory draft in this country, right, of those who are 18 years old. And many of the people there fighting and God forbid, dying or getting wounded are people who were drafted as part of the mandatory draft or potentially reservists serving later in life. We've had 300,000+ reservists called up. So it's a sensitive issue here in Israel. I think the public understands the big picture, understands how important and how essential it is to win this war. It's true across the political spectrum here in Israel. There's no misunderstanding of what the stakes are. But nonetheless, obviously, the last thing people here want to see are the casualties among soldiers. Right. But given what Doron was describing as experiences from IDF Special Forces, this is urban warfare, and obviously we can sadly, I think, expect that there will be more casualties, and the public, I think, will be generally understanding and patient, even if it's painful.
I think we have to acknowledge the public is ready for that. They understand the gravity of the situation. We saw the massacre that started the whole the campaign. So the soldiers know that they are determined that you go to war. This is what expected of you, to win victory, and victory comes with a cost. As terrible as it sounds.
As terrible as it sounds, but the army is scoring up some achievements, as we mentioned today, killing the Jabalia battalion commander in northern Gaza Strip, Ibrahim Bieri, apparently was a major figure in directing the October 7th terror attack. Now, as the IDF continues with its coordinated ground, air, and sea operations inside Gaza, it will continue to target Hamas's top brass. The group's leaders are seen as the driving force behind its countless attacks, especially on October 7th. Now, while Israel has vowed to eliminate every single leader and commander behind those attacks, Hamas's top leadership remains in hiding, whether beneath the ground, in Gaza, or abroad elsewhere. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more on that.
Day 25 of Israel's war against Hamas. The IDF continues to expand its ground operation in Gaza. As the forces advance, they're met with resistance by Hamas fighters. Dozens of terrorists hiding in buildings and in underground tunnels have been killed in firefights and airstrikes. This includes the targeted elimination of Nassim Abu Ajina, commander of Hamas's Beit Lahia battalion, on Tuesday morning. Abu Ajina oversaw the October 7th attacks on Kibbutz Erez and Moshav Nativa Asara.
The army is focused on the goals of the war defined by the political echelon, the defeat of Hamas and the elimination of its leaders. After the massacre they carried out on October 7th, this organization will not control Gaza militarily and politically.
Abu Ajina is the latest in dozens of Hamas commanders targeted in Israeli airstrikes over the past 3.5 weeks. This includes Assam Abu Rakba, the head of Hamas's aerial units, Shadi Baroud, deputy head of Hamas's military intelligence, and Joad Abu Shamale, Hamas's minister of economy and top money guy. That's in addition to 4 members of Hamas's political bureau eliminated since October 7th. In total, Israeli forces have killed so far an estimated 2,500 terrorists.
We are in the middle of a war for our existence. We have set 2 goals for the war: to annihilate Hamas by destroying its military and governance abilities, and to do everything possible to bring our hostages back home. We are raining hellfire on Hamas. We have already killed thousands of terrorists, and this is only the beginning.
But Israel has yet to reach the top leadership of Hamas. The terror group's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, and the head of its military wing, Mohammed Def, are the IDF's top targets in Gaza. They're believed to be hiding deep underground in one of Hamas's hidden command centers, located under hospitals, schools, and mosques. While the group's exiled leaders, such as Ismail Haniyeh and Salah el-Arouri, enjoy their refuge in Qatar and Lebanon. And so, as Israel's ground offensive continues to deepen, so will the efforts to eliminate Hamas's top commanders, whether above ground or beneath it.
Now, of course, this war has regional consequences. And as we mentioned earlier, Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels today launched ballistic missiles and drones at Israel's Red Sea resort of Eilat. Those were intercepted by the Arrow air defense system. Here's the Houthi spokesperson taking responsibility for those attacks.
Our armed forces launched a large barrage of ballistic and winged missiles and a large number of drones at various targets of the Israeli enemy in the occupied territories. This is the third such strike in support of our brothers in Palestine. We will continue to carry out attacks with missiles and drones until the end of the Israeli aggression.
Doron, we mentioned the IDF being tested on the ground. It's infantry combat troops in new ways, but also its air defense systems. The U.S., of course, intercepting prior launches by the Houthi rebels, but the Arrow defense system also being tested in real time today.
And proved themselves and targeting
Eilat. Hold on, we're going to Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari.
We'll translate with the paraphrase, not exact words. Good evening. Our forces are fighting in Gaza, are killing terrorists at close range, and with a combined act from the land, air, and sea. In the late afternoon, ground forces took over a outpost of Hamas in the west of the city of Jabalia. This outpost was a place for training for terror attacks from which terrorists went out for the massacre and go out to the beach area from where they went out to massacres. During the battle, many terrorists were killed. The infrastructure was destroyed. It was a difficult and complex war, sometimes face-to-face. During the battle, we lost fighters. We relayed a message to the families of 2 IDF fighters who died during the fighting. We killed tonight the terrorist, the murderous terrorist, Ibrahim Be'ari. Be'ari was one of the main figures in the north of the Strip since he also played a part in the massacres of the 7th of October. Through our actors, many terrorists were killed. And also underneath the building, when the building was hit, then underground facilities were also collapsed. And that was the entire infrastructure collapsed and many terrorists were killed underground. The Hamas terrorists are still using the civilian population as human shields in an intentional and cruel way. Yahya Sinwar doesn't care about the residents of Gaza. He built his terrorist infrastructure on purpose under civilians' houses. He stands behind the massacre, not just of Israeli citizens on 7th of October, but also the massacre that has the Gaza Strip collapse on its residents. So we call again today to the residents of the northern parts of the Gaza Strip to go south. We will allow it through corridors, go beyond Wadi Gaza. It is a safer space. We will continue to hit with strength in Gaza City and the north of the Strip. We will continue to act against every terrorist in the entire area of the Gaza Strip. In the area of the Red Sea, we shot down a surface missile headed toward Israel through the long-range missile defense system, the Arrow. This is the first action of the system during war, and it acted in a successful way. The IDF also shut down 2 hostile aircraft in the space. All were shot down outside the space of the state of Israel through the action of the Air Force. We also put out warships that add to the defense. With air space defense, with all of the systems needed to defend the citizens of the state of Israel in the south and in all parts of the country. There are many actors in the region who are acting in the agency of Iran, including the Houthis, who are trying to challenge us and to try to divert our attention from the war in Gaza. We are staying focused. We are focused on the war in Gaza. We will know how to defend ourselves in every place. as needed. We are acting in cooperation with the Army of the United States, with Central Command. Our move to CENTCOM, our move into CENTCOM 2 years ago has proven itself a lot, with a lot of the ability to pass information and intelligence with the United States Air Force through Central Command and the 5th Fleet. We are working with them in one unit to support the Israeli space. The IDF knows on its own to guard the security interests of the state of Israel, and will know to respond at the time and place of its choosing. In the north, the continued attempt to shoot at IDF forces across the border from Lebanon, there is no injuries to our forces. The IDF is shot back at Hezbollah infrastructure in South Lebanon. We are continuing to react in a determined way and an immediate way to all attempt to shoot by terrorists that is coming to us on the fence or to shoot across it. Until now, we have passed information to 317 families of bereaved soldiers, of displaced soldiers. We want to bring all the hostages home. In recent hours, there are a lot of rumors across the country. I ask everyone to stick to the official reports of ours. We will continue to update the public in a trustworthy and exact way, while keeping to the security of our forces. We will report while guarding the security of our forces, and I ask the public not to listen to rumors. Questions, please. Channel 14. You've asked the residents of the Northern Strip to go to the south. What is your policy towards the citizens of the Northern Gaza Strip who have stayed? Are you treating them as terrorists? And in addition, I'd like to know whether the laser system for air defense has gone into use. Our air defense are multi-layered, and there are still other projects in the defense ministry that they're continuing to try to move forward with them. And we aren't going to say what's battle ready and what's not. We're working with the defense ministry, the IDF, the military industries to try to add capabilities to the state of Israel. It doesn't need to be published in the media. As for your first question, we are acting against an enemy. We're killing terrorists in our sorrow, and this is our murderous enemy that we are working against. It is using the civilians as human shields, and many of them it didn't allow to move to the South Gaza Strip. We acted in order to allow them to move to the south. We're still asking them to move to the south, to be focused on the enemy. There are ghost areas where the population really did leave. No, he's talking about medical facilities. I'm sorry. And we're not going to allow, Hamas still has infrastructure inside hospitals, because Hamas, against international law, it's a war crime to use hospitals in this way. We will continue to gather all of the testimony so that the world can see.
That is the IDF spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, giving his nightly briefing on Israeli television. I just want to clarify a couple of the points he made. He did refer to rumors spreading throughout Israel. Those have to do with possible Israeli casualties in the Gaza Strip. So far, the army has only confirmed 2 fatalities, 2 casualties there. He's urging the public not to speculate beyond that. Another question relating to treating the civilian the population of northern Gaza is being treated. That's in response to reports coming from out of Gaza Strip of civilian casualties in the northern Gaza Strip. Again, we cannot confirm independently any of those numbers coming out of Hamas. I will note that earlier there was a report of several hundred people being killed in the Jabalia camp, even as many as 500. That's out of Gaza. Those numbers were then lowered to less than 50 just about an hour later. So we cannot give you any kind of numbers without any kind of independent confirmation. Doron, I want to go back to you because any comments that you may have relating to what the Rear Admiral had to say. And also, of course, he mentioned, as we said, the Arrow major step going into operational use today.
When he talked about the defense mechanism mechanism that we had. We talked about the layers that we have, and he talked about that it was discussed or was asked about operational devices that are not yet operational, and he didn't elaborate. But a great success in the interception in Eilat, and I think we have a very solid defense mechanism right now against missiles. And I think what he said, that we are focusing on the Gaza Strip, so it's not like we're going to war now with the Houthis, but we'll settle the account later on about those cynical and attacks to, in fact, people that were evacuated from Gaza into Eilat. This is really unacceptable. The other question, which was the other answer he gave, which was interesting and it's important to emphasize, was about civilians that stayed in the northern part of Gaza and don't go south. And I think it was clear, as the Major General, the commander of the South said, the IDF goes to war according to the values of the IDF, the values of Tzahal. So, of course, we are only targeting enemy, Hamas operative. The consequences of collateral damage, given the structure, the way they build this infrastructure underneath houses and underneath houses of people and underneath hospitals and things of those sorts, sometimes causes collateral damage, which we, of course, are very sorry about. But it was very clear. There's no question that we targeting civilians in purpose, even if they stayed in the northern Gaza against our advice for them to go south.
And he didn't take the bait from Channel 14 in the question, are you treating them as if they're terrorists? He did not say that Israel's treating them as if they're terrorists.
Not, yeah.
Of course not. But it's important to emphasize. He said we're treating them as if they're civilians. But after 2 weeks of telling people to leave, of course, as he himself admitted, some of them wanted to leave and couldn't because Hamas was stopping them from leaving, and others are in hospitals and are infirm and can't leave. Of course, there are many tragic stories. But he said and was determined that Israel's still going to be hitting the infrastructure it can. Of course, as we have to emphasize to viewers, Israel's actions on the ground, and Doron knows this full well, are vetted by lawyers who are applying the standards of international humanitarian law to everything that happens.
Right, and we have to note that that area in northern Gaza is both where the hostages are believed to be held, and in fact we had proof of that because the rescue of this young soldier the other day was in that area in northern Gaza.
I think that courage, determination, and the full intensity of the fires, of course, is essential, but we have to also employ wisdom in the way we move and follow those targets. It has to be very smart. We really don't, we want the window of operation to be open enough, and we are very careful. I think we'll be very careful in the way we move in and achieve our goals. And I think this is the way the IDF now works.
Because civilian casualties are bad for Israel, for exactly the reason that Doron just said.
Oh, and another interesting point, he mentioned the cooperation with the United States, with the Sixth Fleet, and in other ways, but he also stressed Israel is acting alone. That could be in part a reaction. There was a report in the New York Times this evening, American commandos are in Israel helping to locate hostages. There were early reports of support personnel, mainly on the side of intelligence, perhaps assisting Israel in terms of locating hostages in Gaza. Remember, there are many American citizens there, Israelis who hold American citizenship. This report suggests there are U.S. commandos, which would be something new. Plus, we should know, we should note the U.S. itself, though, did confirm it sent 300 more troops to the Middle East. That was earlier confirmation day, but they stressed not within Israel. Those are in other areas, and of course U.S. forces in the region are coming under attack in other locations, particularly on the ground in Iraq and in Syria.
We know very well the American Special Forces. I myself know them from my youth, but of course in terms of our special forces and the way we conduct the war in our territories, it will be conducted by us, by the IDF, and we don't need this extra help. And I don't think the Americans think in this terms. But in terms of the overall regional context, this is where America plays a role, an important role. We saw it with the interception of the Houthi missiles. We see it with respect to the northern border in Syria and the whole context of Iran. But this is the context in which we work hand in hand with the U.S., but not on the ground in our territories, in our fronts.
It was an essential statement because Israel's national security doctrine, going back to the birth of Zionism, and again, as I always say, it's such a cliche that we just check it off our bingo card in our heads whenever we're listening to a speech from Benjamin Netanyahu, is that Israel defends itself by itself, right? And the whole concept of the Jewish state, the whole concept of Zionism is we alone are responsible for ourselves self-defense because at the end of the day, we are alone and we don't trust anybody else. So he is sending a message in Hebrew to the Israeli public, but of course also by extension, but I think really, Kalev, more to us than the rest of the world, that don't worry, we still can defend ourselves by ourselves. It's important to have a relationship with the United States, to work with the United States. We thank the United States for its support. And yes, there are 2 U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups parked in the Mediterranean, but at the end of the day, we are capable of defending our own country.
All right, I want to go back to our Pia Steckelbach down in Sderot. Pia, update on any updates on the situation there. Also, we heard Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari saying there's been heavy fighting in the northern Gaza Strip. He stressed Israel trying to avoid civilian casualties, but saying right now it's a war zone. There's a combat situation there, and while the IDF is doing anything it can, just as it's absorbing casualties, it's expected they'll be on the civilian side as well.
Right, Kalev. Well, the fighting has been intensifying here throughout the last hours. We know that heavy fighting is taking place on the ground and from the air here. We've been hearing the airstrikes. We've been seeing the sky lighting up whenever an airstrike is happening here. We are also hearing the Israeli artillery striking Gaza from here, specifically the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We are here looking into, during daylight at least, to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We do know that specifically within the last hours, the Israeli troops have been targeting the Jabalia area in the north of Gaza. This is where that important Hamas commander was killed, but also where dozens of civilians are believed to have been killed. This is the area that the Israeli forces civilians have been calling upon those people to evacuate towards the south, but we do know that an unknown number of people have not done that for several reasons. People who cannot evacuate for many reasons, health reasons, children, elderly people. But we also do know that people who evacuated south and found themselves in dire humanitarian conditions, some of them even made their way back to the north because they have their houses there, and they're now in the crossfire of those Israeli airstrikes and also those fierce fighting taking place on the ground between Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, and the Israeli army. The Israeli army also saying in a statement this evening that 2 soldiers were killed in that ground offensive, and also 2 more are seriously injured there. But we do see here that the Israeli airstrikes are intensifying, as we hear from the ground that also the fighting that troops are engaged on the ground is becoming more fierce there, Kalev.
All right, Pia Steckelbach there in the south near the Gaza border. Thank you for that. Now, since October 7th, the world has seen a surge of anti-Semitism and demonization of Israel, from the web to the streets. From verbal to physical assaults. Israeli President Isaac Herzog addressed this issue today with this statement.
This is a message that must be heard loud and clear. When they say from the river to the sea, they say without any Jews. When they demonstrate on campuses against Israel, that means without Jews. When they criticize Israel fighting for its defending its people and fighting against the most brutal attack that humanity has seen in last generation, they mean no Jews. This is a fight not only against Israel, it's a fight against anti-Semites all over the world, and we are here to strengthen our brothers and sisters of Jewish communities all over the world, to show solidarity with them, because we are all in this together. We support the Jewish communities. We call upon world leaders and upon each state's leadership to make sure that Jews are protected and defended, and that the fight against anti-Semitism is covered in all layers of the legal and law enforcement systems, so that Jews will not be hurt. Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS are all there together, wishing to ban us all from the face of the earth. And if it starts with Israel and it starts with the Jews, it will never end there. Europe will be next, and that is why we are fighting a battle on behalf of the entire world.
Now, anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian protests have been seen all over Europe, despite the fact that many European citizens have been killed by Hamas or are being held hostage in Gaza since October 7th. This includes Germany, which 2 days ago learned, like the rest of the world, about the murder of German-Israeli citizen Shani Lok, whose half-naked body was dragged into Gaza following the attack on the Supernova Music Festival. Now, there is a delegation of European parliamentarians visiting Israel today, and joining us in studio is one of them, Lisa Hildegard Badum, member of the Bundestag for the Alliance 90, or the Green Party, perhaps better known. Lisa, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
First of all, let me ask you about your trip here, and also about Germany how is it dealing with the fact, as I said before, that Germans are involved, being both as victims, as we saw, by that unfortunate woman, and the fact there are German citizens being held in Gaza?
I think a lot of people in Germany are horrified by the massacres that we have been seeing, and that's why I wanted to come here. I wanted to see with my own eyes what happened and how Israel is coping with the situation. And so we have been to Kfar Aza, one kibbutz which suffered an attack, and we met with people who formerly lived in Kfar Aza and who have relatives who are held as hostages at the moment. And so this, it was really, for me, it was a visit which brought a lot of impressions to me.
I can imagine. Now, the German government has been relatively supportive of Israel in its military campaign. The Greens are part of the alliance, the current governing alliance. But give us a sense about that support. Israel wants to carry out a military operation. It knows and acknowledges that there will be civilians be killed as it tries to rescue its hostages and protect its civilians. Give us a sense of how you think the German government policy is to this Israel's undertaking so far.
So German government is very clear that, of course, Israel has the right to defend itself, and I think it's clear that it's also a battle of surviving, a battle that Israel can still exist in this region. I think it's very clear to German government and also to our responsibility, which we have from our history, and we are very sure that Israel is, of course, handling the situation within the humanitarian law. And I think it's a problem that repeatedly there are accusations from the United Nations and other institutions that humanitarian law might not be, so IDF might not be conform to humanitarian law. Everything I saw, and we spoke with a lot of people from the IDF, is that the Israeli army is trying everything to protect civilians in Gaza and to attack the terror centers we have there and to attack Hamas and not civilians.
Can I just ask you, because the Greens Party has been critical, we have to say, of Israeli policies in the past, especially regarding the Palestinians. Has it viewed this situation somewhat differently? I mean, following the October 7th attack, or you speaking more personally, or what's your sense of that?
So, of course, I'm a friend of Israel for many, many years, but also the Green Party the Green Party maybe it used to be before 20, 30 years or something. We have a majority of our party members. We are in solidarity with Israel. It's very clear for us that it's our duty as citizens and as part of the government to support Israel.
Okay. And let me ask you, we heard President Herzog speak.
And maybe I can add this, and
Please.
You heard our foreign minister, she spoke out very loud and clearly that the terror attack of Hamas is a massacre, and that Israel has to do everything to defend itself.
Okay, and let me just ask you also about, we heard President Herzog speak about concern over, certainly there's freedom of expression, and if those who want to support Palestinians be critical Israel, that's there, but disturbing tones in some of these rallies, support for Hamas, incitement that crosses the line into anti-Semitism and demonization of Israel, and unfortunately more serious incidents such as the burning or torching of a synagogue in Berlin. How concerned are you as the government about these manifestations of anti-Semitism?
We're seriously concerned. We all think it's a shame. It's a shame for Germany that Jews cannot live here can live in Germany in peace and security, and that they have to fear attacks. And a lot of demonstrations were forbidden, were those paroles occurred,
Sure.
you mentioned, and we have to think about further measures against terror organizations in Germany, and a lot of them have too much space to move around, and yeah, this will be part of our discussions in the next month, what we can do against radical Islam.
All right. Well, I just want to ask you, Owen Alterman, our senior diplomatic correspondent. Interesting to hear, because Europe has been a difficult position for Israel diplomatically in the past as it's conducted its military operations, including in the Gaza Strip. Do you sense a change in tone coming here?
Well, two levels. I think, Kalev, that the response from Europe's leaders, the political center of Europe, if you will, has just been extraordinary, including, but especially at the European Union in Brussels. Remember the Commission building being lit up with the Israeli flag, the strong statements from Ursula von der Leyen. There obviously has been pushback, especially over the course of time within the EU and its institutions. But still, I think even at this hour, even at this date, the support from the political center in Europe has just been extraordinary. And I think that that has to be Israel's strategy politically going forward in Western democracies, to occupy the political center, right? Not be connected with the far right or the far left, but to be the home for people who are in the political center. And this is a trend that I hope our officials pick up the ball and run with. But of course, Germany is not Europe. Germany is Germany. Just to make clear what the member of parliament said, Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister, is from the Green Party. So is coming from the Green Party, and what she says represents the Green Party. But Germany's post-Holocaust culture, you know, I was listening to you, I was almost brought to tears. The post-Holocaust culture that Germany has built, that the German people have built, not just but the German people have built over the course of 3 generations, is just so extraordinary, and maybe the greatest example and the most courageous example of reconciliation in human history. And I think all of us in Israel just are in awe of it, and owe the German people, not just the leaders, but the people at the popular level, an incredible amount of gratitude that they have held so strong with this culture for so long, over so many decades. And I think I join really millions of Israelis in just expressing an enormous amount of gratitude for that, for your support at this hour, but much more so for all that's been accomplished in the relations between our peoples over not just decades, but generations.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, I was, as an MK, I was heading our delegation to the European Council, and I think it was the philosophy of my party, and I think in general this is where we stand right now. Israel alliance is Europe, US, European Union, and even NATO, and I think we have to, the regional conflict that we are within only strengthen the issue. This is the alliance that we have to keep and maintain strategically as we look forward, and I think it's also a reminder to Israelis that sometimes, I have to admit, we're snobbing Western European countries for a while. We are part of this alliance, and this is how we go forward from this regional conflict forward.
Amen.
Well, I think this conflict has somewhat sharpened those views, especially as we see the direction that, for example, Russia and some other countries have taken as well. Lisa Hildegard Badum, thank you for joining us on I-24.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming to Israel. Now, let's move back down south. For 2 weeks, Israeli news Channel 12 has followed families of the missing and kidnapped as they work tirelessly to find any information they can about. I'm sorry, I'm going to backtrack there. Okay. No, okay. I'm going to bring it back to studio. Daron, let me just ask you. Now we've heard about. You spoke about the Americans.
The alliance, for sure. And I'm saying it because I think there were moments of clashes between us and Europeans in terms of the views that we have according to our conflict. But now that the conflict goes regional and Europe is part of the conflict in some sense, we really have to think about it globally. And I say and emphasize, our ties with the European Union, with the European Council, also with NATO, are crucial for the existence of Israel, and I think we can contribute to Europe, Europe can contribute to us, and together with the US umbrella, we can try to get out of this regional conflict.
Okay, Lisa Hildegard Badum, again, thank you for joining us. And now we're going to move back down south. The local security chief of Kibbutz Givim near the Gaza Strip gave I-24 News a rare look at life in the community after the October 7th attack and his determinedly optimistic vision for the future of the area despite the tragedy it has gone through. Uri Shapira has that story.
Kibbutz Gevim, near the Gaza Strip, adjacent to the southern city of Sderot, was not severely hit by the brutal terror attack by Hamas on October 7. But things could have been very different, as Gil Schwartzman, a member of the kibbutz, tells I-24 News about the dramatic moments.
At around 7 a.m., I heard gunshots around the gate. I got a call from the local security coordinator. He said, "I've been shot. I'm injured." I called the standby squad, and we came to help him. Another car was shot at, and the guy there was shot in his head, but he survived. Another car was also hit by gunshots and grenades. We counted 45 bullet holes in the car. The local security chief got hit in his leg, and I had to take his place. We also had a lot of luck, perhaps even divine providence. I want to show you something special. This gate took a lot of bullets. When we open the gate, look at the shape of the bullet exit hole.
Kibbutz Gevim was established in 1947, a few months before Israel declared its independence. Over the years, it's known many challenges due to its sensitive location.
In the beginning, people lived here in tents. In July 1947, this structure was built to protect the residents from attacks by Egyptians. Members of the kibbutz lived in tents and small cabins.
Schwartzman is one of 16 people of the standby squad, the only ones who remain in the kibbutz out of its 617 members. When we walk around, we see empty houses. But thanks to Schwartzman and the few people who were left here, the kibbutz is not neglected, and even the local dairy is functioning.
I was in Germany on a family vacation when the situation started. After a few days I came back. It's a bit strange to be here. I'm alone here except for a few people and soldiers, but what can I do?
Outside the kibbutz we visit Soutup, which Schwartzman directs. This startup hub is home to dozens of high-tech companies which develop revolutionary inventions from 3D printers to FSMP platforms.
We've been active for 6 years now. All the companies have told me that they are not leaving this hub. Other companies have been interested in participating in this project. It's the first high-tech hub in the Negev, and one of the biggest and most successful ones. High-tech always has a future. I have no doubt that in 2 years, when you come back to visit, we'll have expanded to 50 companies.
Despite the horrific tragedy, Schwartzman is still optimistic and says he believes that most of the residents will return to their home eventually, and that Gevim and the high-tech scene will flourish. Perhaps a ray of hope in this dark time in the south.
Owen, there's news coming out from Reuters releasing a story relating to something you spoke about earlier. According to Palestinian and Egyptian sources, the Rafah crossing will be opened today for Wednesday, tomorrow, for a number of Gazans to complete their treatment in the Egyptian hospitals.
Wow, how about that?
So it seems that when Tzachi Hanegbi was speaking, he
knew of what he spoke.
He was giving foreshadowing, and that is an important development.
Listen, I just want to get here for a second. He hinted at that in what he was saying, and he hinted at the ships. So let's see exactly where they're going to be treated, but a very interesting development.
It emphasized the regional aspect of the conflict. Egypt and Jordan are, we have to admit, our allies in this context. Also, I think the Palestinian Authority, and as we go forward, we have to maintain this alliance in order to really contain this conflict and win.
I also suspect, we'll have to learn more as this unfolds, that there was a certain person with the initials JB who might have been involved in this development as well.
I would have to say Secretary of Blinken. We'll talk about this a little later in the program when we go to Washington. By the way, those are live pictures you're seeing in the back there, flares and smokes. That is Gaza Strip, the northern Gaza Strip, and clearly intense fighting continuing there. through the evening, which Secretary of State Blinken gave testimony today in the Senate regarding a foreign aid package that the Biden administration is trying to push through, including $14 billion for Israel. And he was stressed the need for regional cooperation, including Egypt, to come into Gaza when the operation is over, to help administer that.
Yeah, I think it's part in the end of the initial Saudi initiative, and I think once this conflict ends, we'll be back on track, I hope, to this idea of strengthening this regional alliance, and this is the only way out from the conflict. But we're still in the early stages of this campaign, and there's a lot of fighting going forward and a lot of obstacles going forward.
All right, Doron Avital, Owen Alterman, thank you for joining us. Stay with us. Those are live pictures you were just seeing there of the Gaza Strip. Obviously, fierce fighting still going on. Of course, confirmation of 2 Israeli soldiers who have been killed there during that battle. Stay with us. We'll be back at the top of the hour with more on I-24 News, our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war.
Is far more susceptible to damage than previously believed.
Stress is power conferred upon something, and when that power exceeds a certain level, the something will break down.
At her lab in Hebrew University's Edmund and Lily Safra Center for Brain Sciences, Professor Hermona Sarek is proving just how permanent that damage is.
There's a major difference between our brain and other tissues in our body. So muscle cells can be replaced. Blood cells are replaced on a daily basis. But the nerve cells we have in our brain, that's what we got born with, and that's it for the rest of our lives. We've examined recently what happens to a young mouse, 7 days old, when it's stressed. And a mouse that has been subjected to that type of stress will be an underdog forever.
What Professor Sarek has discovered is that it alters the physical brain, sometimes permanently.
We analyzed those genes and we found genes that are modified.
These physical stress reactions can actually cause degenerative brain disease.
When they fail to vanish, you get diseases. When they accumulate over time without being removed from the cells, this is when you get damage, permanent damage.
So not only do the effects of stress accumulate forever, they can then pass to future generations.
We need to pay special effort to avoid stress being inflicted on the young ones, because it's much more dangerous to them.
Over 1,300 people murdered and more than 3,000 injured, and the war with Hamas continues. We bring you first-hand testimonies from the front lines, from those who survived, and all the records of the atrocities by Hamas. Follow us as Israel fights terror from the south and north. Get the inside scoop on what's going on. Only on I-24 News.
speak, our soldiers are fighting on the battlefield, fighting with courage and heroism, engaging in fierce, close-quarter battles in which they are eliminating terrorists. This type of combat endangers our forces and carries a heavy price, and it is complex, but it is critical to achieve the objectives of the war.
Welcome to or back to the special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 25 of Israel's war against Hamas. A quick update. Air raid siren alert has just been issued for the Ashkelon region. We'll give you any further information we have as we go along. We're joined in studio now by Dr. Emmanuel Navon, an international relations expert and the CEO of Elnit, and Reserves IDF Major General Eitan Dangot, a former military secretary to 3 defense ministers, former coordinator of government activities in the territories. I have to tell you now, we are getting sirens in Tel Aviv. I'm going to try to keep broadcasting as we go. Sirens in Tel Aviv. We're going to stay in the studio. Actually, you can see some of the other employees running in the background there to the air raid shelter. We're going to try to stay on air if we can to bring you a live feed if we have from the Tel Aviv skyline. At this hour, there have been, this is not the first time, there have been Tel Aviv sirens in Tel Aviv during the day, several interceptions by the Iron Dome defense system. There was also rockets fired this afternoon at the city of Ashdod. There were 4 people injured in that incident. We're just now waiting usually for the Iron Dome interception system to operate. Eitan, it seems as a lot of rocket firing today. It seems as Gaza, the Hamas is being under pressure in northern Gaza. They're responding with some heavy rocket fire.
Yes, it has started from yesterday that you can see that there is more intensive rocket attacks from Gaza towards the medium and the long range. What does it mean? It means that, first of all, Hamas has capacities and their capabilities and they have enough rockets and they are making...
Oh, I just want to say we just heard a boom and the studio did shake a little bit. That was presumably the Iron Dome interception, or it landed at sea, perhaps.
Can be. So what I said, that Hamas is making a calculating launchering system by keeping more rockets for medium and long range. What I think is this is a way of response to try to press the Israeli public opinion and to create any kind of uncertainty by the population by launching towards the center.
Okay, I just want to say just a minute ago, those are interceptions, those lights that you see going up. That's our feed from Israel's Channel 12 News. You saw a couple of interceptors go up. That's the sky. Usually we see some flashes there. So it looks like there were interceptions in the skies right above the studio here in Tel Aviv.
So just to finalize this, it will continue, but this is the fact. One of the failure of Israel during the escalations with Hamas, that we didn't succeed to find any kind of a system to destroy these launchers. We missed the fact that if we would use a attack at the beginning, at the producing system, at the storages, and this kind of thing, the damage would be much more than now try to catch the launcher or those who are launching from the field. So this is something that as more as we are going and creating success in our offensive operation, often we will see this kind of launchering towards population
All right, hold on. We're
area.
seeing more interceptions in the sky. This was us. I don't think that's live. That was a.
That what we saw
a couple
before
of
as
minutes
well.
ago. Yes.
And we have to explain to the people who are watching us that the orders in Israel is to wait 10 minutes from the siren till there is a allowing to move from their shelter, because there are sometimes some pieces of the launchers or the missile that.
Right, the intercepted missiles, the fragments from the missiles coming down, and there have been injuries from that. And it looks like this was a series of missiles. Sirens ran across the whole Tel Aviv, greater Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Cities like Ramat Gan, Bnei Brak, Petach Tikva, Ramat HaSharon, Bat Yam, and Cholon. So a fairly widespread attack. Pretty much this is the second time this day we've seen this kind of incident, this kind of rocket fire in the Tel Aviv area. And as we explained, some of that is obviously a reaction to the intense fighting of the Israeli ground forces now in the northern Gaza Strip, as Hamas finds itself under more and more pressure, and its rocket launchers under more and more pressure. They have to utilize their arsenal, obviously, before the IDF.
For another few weeks or months to serve their purpose during the war. So it still will be a problem that we will have to face with it and to try to make the damage as little as we can.
Right, and Emmanuel, a test of the Israeli public. It's important to remind the viewers, the entire Israeli public, in a sense, is on the front line of these attacks. This is disrupting daily life, disrupting the economic life, social, education in every way. These attacks are a test of the Israeli public.
Yeah, and I think what's impressive about this war is how Israeli society has reacted to the war. If before the war we had a very divided public arguing and fighting about judicial reform, today we have an Israeli society that is united against the enemy, that is fighting regardless of political opinions, that is fighting regardless of people's opinion of the government, and that are also helping each other. We witness a lot of initiatives supporting civilians affected by the terrorist attacks of Hamas, supporting our soldiers. And that's, I think, where our enemies have been mistaken, misunderstanding and misreading Israeli society. The fact that we were arguing about politics a few months ago does not mean that we won't do everything to protect our country. Unlike our neighbors, fighting here does not mean destroying our own country and killing each other. It's a major misunderstanding and misreading of Hamas and other enemies in the region.
Right, and let's talk a little about the ground operation now going on in the Gaza Strip. We reported earlier on the IDF confirming at least 2 soldiers falling in that battle, but dozens of Hamas terrorists, including some major figures, the Jabalia battalion commander who directed much of the October 7th attack, being killed. But really now Israel is getting, the IDF is getting into the, if you want to call it the nitty-gritty, the really difficult stage of really fighting and starting to move in those dense urban areas in Gaza City.
Absolutely. I think that first of all, this offensive operation now around Gaza is going more and more towards a higher stage. And what we see now, much more divisions or brigades are entered to Gaza. The program or the plan is running, but it's running and moving as it should be, slowly, with careful activities, with a direct fire. We have very important goal to kill and to destroy more and more people from Hamas and infrastructure and arms, etc. There is immediate intelligence that is coming also to the forces during their activities. So we don't have to rapid, we don't have to hurry, we have to make it with a very patient steps around us. But On the other hand, let's set it very clearly. This is one of the most difficult area to make urbanic war in the world, in my opinion, during the last dozen years that you watch it. And because of it, they organized themselves for the last years very deeply with the arms, with the underground city they have in the tunnels, in the large tunnels, using a lot of anti-tank missiles, using a lot of charges, and making it flexible way when they identify the movement of the IDF. So it's very, very professional way of work, very, very patient, and I hope it will continue in such a way. We will continue to block and to surround the main strip of the Gaza city in order to move them. By the way, we left open area for the civilian who didn't left till now, the area of the north part of Gaza.
Right.
It is in the southeast of the area that we entered.
All right. I want to move away a little away from Israel now to the United States. The Israel-Hamas conflict continues to be a source of fierce debate at the United Nations. And last night, Israeli ambassador for the UN, Gilad Erdan, made the bold gesture in the Security Council of donning a yellow star like those that Jews were forced to wear under the Nazis. Here's Erdan.
Some member states have learned nothing in the past 80 years. Some of you have forgotten why this body was established. So I will remind you, from this day on, each time you look at me, you will remember what staying silent in the face of evil means. Just like my grandparents and the grandparents of millions of Jews, from now on, my team and I will wear yellow stars. We will wear this star until you condemn the atrocities of Hamas and demand the immediate release of our hostages.
Well, for more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, in New York. And, Mike, a dramatic gesture there by the ambassador. Not everybody in Israel feels this is the way to go, but clearly he wants to make a point there in what is clearly you could say, an unfriendly environment at the UN, to say the least.
Yeah, I think there's good faith arguments to be made on both sides of this, Kalev. You know, Erdan is on the ground there at the UN day after day, deals with the absolute nonsense that goes on there, the anti-Israel bias, which is as prominent as ever, and is quite frustrated with what he's seen as the UN's unwillingness to unconditionally, especially with the Secretary General, condemn Hamas and their massacre. It shouldn't be that hard. And so what he's basically saying is, hey, if you guys want to be silent about this, well, it harkens back to a day when the world was silent as well, and we saw the repercussions of that. So he's putting on his yellow star, and he says he's going to keep it on until the UN can find the moral courage and clarity to condemn Hamas. Meanwhile, you've got folks like Danny Dayan, the head of the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum, who's criticized Erdan's gesture, saying that it's actually a sign of weakness, that Israel is a state where it can protect all the Jews. If Erdan wants to show a pride in being a Jew, he should slap on an Israeli lapel pin. Some unnamed foreign ministry officials are also saying that Erdan is not coordinating his messaging with the foreign ministry. And Erdan getting undermined somewhat over the last few days. He had come out after Antonio Guterres' controversial comments a couple of weeks ago, possibly equivocating Hamas and Israel's reaction to them. And Erdan said there would be no UN employees that would be granted visas, starting with the humanitarian coordinator, until something changed. Well, that humanitarian coordinator, Martin Griffiths, was given a visa by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who said they would take it on a case-by-case basis. Listen, there's some undertones to this, I think, that are fair to bring up, Kalev. Number one, Erdan is very popular in the Likud and is a potential challenger down the road for the premiership. He's seen somewhat as a threat, popularity-wise, to Benjamin Netanyahu, and we see what happens to those who are seen as a possible challenger, even slightly, down the road to the prime minister, just like Danny Danon before him, who was shuffled off to the UN, Gilad Erdan as well. So there might be some good faith in saying Erdan is wrong here. there's also something to be said that maybe he's being undermined for other reasons altogether.
All right, Mike, stay with us because the Israel-Gaza conflict, also the subject of discussion and some discord in Washington today. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was testifying in the Senate on the Biden administration's request for supplemental funding that would include $14 billion in aid when an anti-Israeli protesters in the hall interrupted the proceedings with chants and shouts. They were then removed by security. Now, of course, today the Senate voting on the appointment of Jack Lew as the next U.S. ambassador to Israel. That's in the face of Republican opposition over Lew's prior support for the Iran nuclear deal. Mike, some very interesting things going on there in the Senate over Jack Lew's nomination. Some Republicans, at least one, sort of breaking ranks with his party on this nomination.
That's right. The vote is actually ongoing now. Earlier today, there was a vote to cut off debate on the issue, and it got the support of two Republicans, Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul. And those are about as far as you can get on Republican philosophy, Graham and Paul. But they have also voted in the final vote now to confirm Jack Lew. So it certainly looks like he will be the new ambassador to Israel. Paul is an isolationist, doesn't really care much about foreign policy to begin with. But Lindsey Graham has made the rounds. He's been essentially a shadow Secretary of State trying to keep Israeli-Saudi normalization in play after the Hamas massacre. He's been to Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt as of late. He said after the cloture vote today to cut off debate, he said, listen, I was just in Israel. They being the Israeli government, apparently, though he didn't name names, said they're okay with Lew. He said he has some concerns about what he did as a Treasury Secretary, especially in advocating for the Iran deal and his work there with possibly weakening sanctions and lack of enforcement. But he says he's a guy that he can work with, and so he voted to make him the new ambassador to Israel. That vote is going to wrap up in the next few minutes, and it certainly looks like Lew will be heading to Jerusalem probably much sooner than anticipated.
Much sooner, and of course he's going to have a hell of a lot on his plate when he gets here. What a time to be coming to Israel as the U.S. ambassador. Mike Wagenheim, thank you for that. Now, over the past few weeks, we brought you stories of tragedy and survival from the communities on the Gaza border attacked by terrorists. But few are as improbable as those of Irit Lahav, a resident of kibbutz near Oz, who on the morning of October 7th initially took shelter in her home's safe room with her daughter, thinking this was just another round of rocket attacks. But she soon realized the terrorists were breaking into her home, and she had to find a way to seal the door of her safe room, which had no lock. She found the solution using some common household items. Well, joining us now is Irit Lahav, survivor of the kibbutz Nir Oz massacre. She's joining us from now, relocated to kibbutz Kramim. Irit, tell us about that morning of October 7th.
We woke up at 6:35 a.m. from the red alert, the color red, it's the missiles alert, and I quickly jumped out of bed in my pajamas, ran to the safe room, and called my daughter, Lotus, come. And she came quickly in. We closed the door, and we need to wait 25 seconds. And we heard the missiles, the bombs, and right away we heard another color red. So my daughter says, let me go out, get the dog in. She ran outside, got the dog in, grabbed my phone, luckily. So we went inside, and she says, Mom, I hear shooting. I said, nah, it can't be. This is just, bombs. We're used to bombs. And then my neighbor texted us a message in our neighborhood saying, somebody's shooting my house. And I was like, no way, no, it cannot be. A second later, my other neighbor sent a text message to all of us saying that he sees armed Palestinians and lock your doors. And I thought, lock the door? How do I lock the door? These doors don't lock. These doors are for missiles, not for against human trying to break open the doors. So I started to really panic because right away we started hearing automatic weapon from all corners of the kibbutz. We are a small kibbutz. Kibbutz Nir Oz only has 420 people. That's all. Automatic weapon, grenades everywhere at the same time. endless shooting, and we start to shake from fear, knowing that any minute they can come in. We turned off the lights, silent. I didn't even want to talk to or whisper to my daughter from this fear. So we just text to each other. I wrote something on my cell phone, gave her the cell phone, and I'm thinking all the time, the door doesn't lock. If they come into our house, we're dead. That's it. So I sent a text message to the kibbutz. We have our own messaging system. How does one lock the door? Nobody knew. Nobody even thought that the doors don't lock. So I started again and again, no response, or people didn't know. So I text the same question to my family, and then I received this picture from my brother who lives 5 kilometers away in Moshav Ein Absor. This is how we did it. And I saw, okay, that's an idea. I can do something similar. Now we sit in the dark, keep silent. We hardly breathe from the fear. If they hear us, we are dead. So I'm trying to think quickly in this dark. What do I have that looks similar to broomsticks? This is just my office. I have books, I have a desk, I have a computer. But what do I have else that could resemble this? And I remember that I have an oar, a rowing stick for a boat for my childhood that I kept as a memory. I took that, and then I needed another piece of stick. So thinking, okay, my vacuum cleaner, the Dyson vacuum cleaner, I took it apart and I used the hose of the vacuum cleaner, and I make jewelry. So I told my daughter, whispering, open a drawer, take the leather string from down there. And then she opens the drawer. We don't even think about it. We just open and move things. But in this time that you have to be quiet, every thing that you touch makes a sound that you think, oh, they will hear us. They will come right away. Anyway, she pulled out the string and I tied it strongly. I realized that I cannot do like my brother's system because the vacuum cleaner hose doesn't go all the way through. So I put it so that it will push the door handle so they won't be able to move it open. Tied it really strongly. The heart is beating, your whole body is shaking. Just you hear all this automatic weapon, grenades all the time, and they can come in every minute. I finally finished, thought it was strong enough, piled a lot of books between the door and where we were hiding under the table, and we crawled under the table. And then I realized that from the shaking and the fear, I bumped into the table, and we sit on the table and it's uncomfortable. You just move, you go, and it's so scary.
Right,
you
were in there for how long in the safe room, Irit?
11 and a half hours under the table. 11 and a half hours. And of course, they came in soon enough. They approached, they shot the house with an automatic weapon from all the sides. They were shouting loud voices in Arabic. We entered at 6:35. At 10:30, they arrived to our house. As I said, they shot from all sides. They broke the whole house. We heard a lot of banging and banging and baking and all the shouting and shouting, loud voices in Arabic. And they approached the door and they tried to open and they bang and they get angry and they bang it and they try. And we were sure that we will die. I was sure that they will open, and my daughter and I were just laying down on the floor, holding hands, and started to say beautiful words to each other. My daughter was saying how much she loves me and she appreciates everything I did for her. And I said to her many, many loving words. And we just laid down on the floor, holding hands and saying goodbye, basically, to each other. Luckily, they couldn't open after 8 longer minutes, and they moved on, breaking more of our house, moved out. Moved to the next door, next neighbor, same thing, shooting. We heard a lot of breaking things, moved to the other neighbors. Then when I moved to the neighbors that live in front of me, when they were using all this automatic weapon, and I heard their daughters, they have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old daughters. They were screaming and crying. I was sure they took them out and killed them from the screaming and crying.
What was the point at which you finally could come out of the safe room?
6 o'clock in the evening. 6 o'clock in the evening.
And
11 and a half hours of despair, really, fear.
I just want to ask you, kibbutz, after that experience, are you ready to go back to the kibbutz near Oz, which suffered terrible losses, and live again in that community so near to Gaza?
Well, it's a good question. I cannot even think about the next hour, really. Your whole world is shattered suddenly. It's something that one doesn't think that they will face in their whole life. So I'm at the stage now that I don't even believe that such a thing could have happened. Will I go back? I don't know. It's so scary. Why would I want to put myself in such a scary situation again?
Well,
it's terrible. I really don't wish for anybody to be in such a terrible fear.
Right, sure. Well, all I could say is I do hope, with the sacrifices being made, that there will be a safer future for the residents of those communities there on the border with Gaza. And let's, I guess, thanks to God, saved by a vacuum hose and a rowing oar. Miracle. It's nice to hear some miracles and survival amidst all this terror and mourning that we're all going through, and I'm sure also you're experiencing.
And we wait for all the hostages to come back with us. Be happy together,
Ivrit Lahav, thank you for joining us on I-24 News to tell your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much for putting those stories out.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Dr. Manuel Navon, thank you for joining us. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more on our continuing coverage on I-24 News.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Israel is officially in a state of war.
This is a very active scene, and we need to get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
Help us, we don't know what to do. We just don't know anything.
Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News. Now, before October 7th, there were some in Israel who doubted the fitness of female soldiers to perform in combat conditions. But in the wake of the Hamas attack on the south, some of the bravest accounts of heroism and sacrifice to emerge from that day were women serving as soldiers, as police officers, and as security personnel in those communities. Some of those stories are told in this report, adapted from Israel's Channel 12 News.
On that Saturday morning, as they rampaged through southern Israel, dozens of terrorists also attacked the city of Sderot and tried to take over the police station. One of the police officers at the station was Major Mor Shakuri.
She called me and said, "Mom, it's important for me that you know that if I don't survive, I love you, I love Dad, and take care of my sister."
When they realized that there were terrorists outside the station, several police officers went up to the roof and fought them from there. They remained there for 8 hours, fighting a nonstop battle, while Sderot's standby squads fought the terrorists from the outside.
Her commander came to me at 7 o'clock and told me she led us, said how many were injured. She spoke with the paramedic, with everyone, and believe me, I didn't even feel that she was in distress. I know more. She does not give up. If she was a coward, she would be alive with me.
Mor was supposed to get married in June to her partner David. He is also a police officer.
She was killed during a battle she was leading, and she shot terrorists and rescued the wounded, and in the end protected the residents of the south. It's not something that comforts us and brings her back, but it is something, giving us the strength that in the end she fought until her last minute and was a hero.
They found her with drawn pistols, 4 cartridges on her. Do you understand? And with all the pain, I'm proud of her, that she contributed and safeguarded us.
For 4 years, we were on the same path. She was simply a fighter.
The late Captain Eden Nimri, a squad commander in the Artillery Corps, was supposed to complete her service as a swimmer, but decided that she wanted to serve as a fighter. On Saturday morning, she was with her team at the base in Nahal Oz when terrorists broke into it.
We got up on Saturday with the intention of having a picnic at the base, at the outpost, which is not her outpost. She has been serving on the northern border for the past year. She had just replaced a team that was there on holiday, and we planned to come to her to have a picnic there.
When they realized that the base had been infiltrated, she and her team jumped out of bed and barefoot in pajamas, they went out to fight the terrorists.
Eden and her team ran to the protected area, where they already found something like 30 terrified female observers. She and 4 female warriors were the only ones with weapons. She took the side that was closer to the entrance and everything was quiet. And with the gestures, she pointed where to aim, drew the weapon, terrorists entered, and her female warriors and Eden eliminated them.
This is the last photo that Eden actually took. As you can see that at first she was really with them on this side. If you think it was a protected room, well, she was initially on the exposed side, and then she jumped to the other side to cover the other opening.
Eden stayed fighting and was killed by terrorist fire. Only 2.5 days later did her family receive the notification of her death.
She was always a fighter, always wanted to be equal among equals, whether in swimming, whether in theater, whether in school graduation ceremonies. She didn't feel unequal. She thought she deserved it. She was always ahead.
I am angry with her, yes. She shouldn't have been there.
On Saturday morning, 90 newly enlisted recruits were at the Zikim base. At the gate, Sergeant Eden Alon Levy, a rescue fighter, was with one of the rookies. She immediately understood the danger.
About 10 terrorists arrived there, equipped with RPGs, grenades. They started shooting at them and the staff. The officers joined her in the battle. Her entire staff fell with her.
6, including Eden, along with another recruit, were killed in this battle and managed to prevent the occupation of the camp and save the recruits.
I think that Eden's story undoubtedly proves how much female fighters can do, and even more. I'm just proud of her and hope I can be as brave as her. Yes, she is simply a hero, everyone's hero.
Eden had finished a military training course 2 months ago and was supposed to go on to officer's course. In addition, she was supposed to go to pilot training in a week after she decided that there were other targets she hadn't conquered. What do you miss the most?
That she came here to harass me. Even when I didn't have the strength. Sorry, it's just... You come here and just run out of energy, get straight into bed, and she'd just come, yell at me like, what's going on, and this. I miss her teasing. She should come and tease, big time.
In this war, more and more heroic stories of brave women are being reported. We know so far that 37 female soldiers were killed, 7 female police officers, a Shin Bet woman, and a paramedic on duty. Women who paid with their lives, while others continue to fight, even now.
And still with us, Eitan Dankot. And Eitan, I'm almost ashamed to say that as more and more women did enter combat roles in the Israeli Defense Forces in recent years, there have been more and more voices questioning their ability, their heart, the appropriateness of having them. And so many stories have come out of October 7th that show women heroically, in many cases, sacrificing themselves and to the point of rescuing many, many more people, either civilians or, as we heard, even in this case, other soldiers, new recruits.
Absolutely. There is no difference between men or women. I think we realize it's after years of that women joined to some of the corps that they were not allowed, and you see such hero stories. We have already some signs about the way they are acting as commanders, as officers, as fighters from small events near the borders, especially in the south.
Right.
But now, what we realize from the stories, you see the brave, the certainty that, first of all, they should give what they can to save people's life, to fight for their soldiers, to fight for the country, and they put themselves on the side. And you see it with the policemen as well, the women that brought here the story. It's something that shows us, in a sad way, in a tragic way, how the women are involved today in many places as really equal fighters, commanders, and I think we all have to salute to those women, to those stories, not to forget them, and to put them in the place they should get this kind of honor. And I'm sure in the future, the IDF, besides the continuing, will open other opportunities for women. There are, especially in these days, when there are stories about what will be the size of IDF, time of joining, I think that after 7th of October, it's clear to us that we need a large army with a lot of fighters. We have to change the concept how to defend the borders, and the female will have a very important task in such a case.
Right. I think there will be a renewed discussion about military service, also involving other sectors, the ultra-Orthodox religious sector.
And by the way, in this sector, you have a lot of change at the atmosphere.
Sure.
And you see such support that I think the country has been come to another situation, and I think there should be a very deep leadership that will use the change of the Israeli society, the unity, female, religious. We are in a junction that we have to build a new society, because the main important thing for Israel's future is the people, and they vote by their legs and the way they are now behaving and giving themselves for the country.
All right. Well, I want to now go back to the fighting inside the Gaza Strip, and I think we have a pretty good map that shows some of the locations. You can see that there. Let's talk about that, because we see there are two main focal points. That area circled in green is where we see much of the which we see much of the fighting there. Let's talk about the strategy of choosing those particular locations. By the way, that red line, which is right below the lower green circle, that is the sort of halfway point of the Gaza Strip, where the IDF has told residents to move south.
It calls the Gaza River.
The Gaza River. It's, of course, it's not a river. It's
not a river.
It's a riverbed, or it's not even a river. It's a wadi. It's barely a wadi.
And for years, it separates between the north part of Gaza to the central part of Gaza.
Right.
And without getting inside the, let's say, the concept of the plan that was planned by IDF and running on the ground, you see one very clear thing. IDF identify that the part of the Gaza city is the main part that by destroying Hamas major structure, by killing the murderers, the terrorists themselves, their infrastructure, the way when they are, it's in the middle of Gaza.
Right, so I just clarify, that's Gaza City is the area between the two green circles.
It's in the middle, but the green sides that you put are the last point on the west side of Gaza Strip on the north side, near the Mediterranean. And if you identify their IDF forces, it means they succeed to surround Gaza. And from there, they can control what's going, especially on the northwest part, the green line on the top there, because this was the part where a lot of terror activities by submariners and kind of terrorists are doing it from the sea towards the Israel area. So this is one of the things that IDF succeed to stop now the corner that was very sensitive and used for commando activities by Hamas with a lot of efforts to create terror activities in the depth of Israel from the sea or from the ground area on the north west side of this part. IDF is on a way of surrounding Gaza,
Gaza City,
and Gaza City, and push it on a way to make the circle as smaller it can be.
All right, stay with us. I want to go now to a guest. Michael Rappaport is an actor you would probably recognize from numerous movies and TV shows over the years. But in recent years, he's extended his fame as a popular commentator on social media and podcasting. A New York Jew, born and raised, Rappaport has been particularly outspoken on the Israel-Hamas war and the anti-Semitism it has stirred up. Now, he hasn't backed down in the face of some heavy blowback. In fact, he's pledged to donate $1 to the Israel Defense Forces for every critical post on his platforms that include a Palestinian flag. Here's a bit of Rappaport from its Instagram page.
The loss of any innocent civilians on any side, in any part of the world, is always a tragedy. Peace, peace, peace. Everybody wants peace. Have you read the Hamas Charter? You should read it. Have you read the Hamas Charter? You should. Take a gander. It's a maniacally written manifesto about killing all Jews, the end of Israel. Also, they don't like Christians. Read, Google the Hamas Charter now.
And joining us from New York is actor and comedian Michael Rappaport. Michael, thank you for joining us. Now, you've been outspoken over the years on any number of subjects, be it sports, the entertainment world, the U.S. politics. Why have you been so outspoken on the situation here, the Israel-Gaza war, and, of course, the various issues that have stirred up, for example, anti-Semitism?
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, there's not why. I mean, everybody should be speaking up, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish. It's a harrowing. I don't need to say what it is. You guys know what it is. The whole world knows what it is. It's a disgusting situation. It's a frightening situation, and you know, it wasn't any question or doubt or hesitation to speak out since it happened on the 7th. And, you know, I'm just trying to be as supportive as I can to everybody dealing with the horrible war that we're in now, and the attack and the unmentionable things that the people of Israel and the whole world are dealing with. Because the one thing that I think gets forgotten is that they think it's just Israelis or Jews that were killed, and that's just not the case. So I had to say something, and I'll continue to say something.
Well, Michael, you should say, well, everyone should be speaking out, but the reality is many entertainers are not speaking out, including some prominent American. There have been those who have, like Barbara Streisand, but many prominent American Jewish entertainers not only not spoken out, some have spoken out, taken a much different position. Some have even attacked you for your position. John Cusack, who I believe you acted in a movie, is known for his support of leftist causes, attacked you personally, called you a clown. He actually called you worse than that, I can't say. For your viewpoint on the conflict here, what's your answer to that?
I mean, my answer to anybody is that if you support Hamas, you support terrorists. Obviously, nobody wants civilians to be killed and in Gaza, and nobody wants civilians to be murdered, raped, and kidnapped in Israel or anywhere else. This is a horrible, horrible, horrific, barbarian group of savage animals, the Hamas, a terrorist group. It is a terrorist group, and there was no hesitation to speak out and support America when we were attacked in 9/11. And this is the same thing. And the anti-Semitism that has come since, and that's coming every single day with swastikas and Stars of David in Paris written on Jewish people's apartments. These are not people that are about negotiating. These are not people that want peace. These are not people that are just going after Jews. They're going after atheists. They're going after Catholics, LGBTQ, and I don't understand what's gotten lost, or how all of a sudden a group that can commit such horrendous acts of terror on October 7th somehow, some way, has gotten more popular since. I've never heard. It's like they're the Beatles of terrorists. It's shocking. People are misinformed. People are they're crazy. I don't understand it, because they're one thing and they're terrorists. And it's not just the Jewish people. The Jewish people and the Israeli people are the flavor of the month. But if this continues, they'll be attracted and be into other flavors if they get any inch further.
Right, and it's somewhat shocking. We're seeing some of this manifestation, as you said, in New York City. This incident at Cooper Union, these rallies, this incident at Cooper Union, where Jewish students had to be locked in the library to protect them. Also, very disturbing, these incidents of people going around ripping down the posters of the hostages that were done. By the way, I saw you put on your social media this clip of this construction worker, who might be named Paulie, confronting one of these people who could show it. Let's take a little bit of that clip, because I saw that you also used it.
Yeah. I'm not fucking Jewish. He's not Jewish. I don't know if he is or not. Doesn't fucking matter. This is fucking the USA. It's New York City. You don't have a fucking right to touch that shit. This is a free country. You can wave your Palestine flag and say death to the Jews or America whenever you want. But we can put up fucking signs. Okay?
Michael, your action is also, you're not someone who shies away from confrontation. I wonder if you saw somebody in New York ripping down these hostage posters, how you would react.
It would be surreal, because it's so surreal that people would forget what side you're on. These are innocent children, women, civilians, older people, and you never could have predicted it. And the pathetic thing is that even Hamas couldn't have predicted anyone doing that. Like, even they must be going, what's going on here? So it's crazy. The response from some people has been crazy. It's been frightening. But, Jewish people aren't going anywhere. Israel isn't going anywhere. As Jewish people, we've heard this before. We've seen this before. And we just have to keep our heads calm. We have to keep our heads, and our chests out tall, and just, deal with this the way it needs to be dealt with. And unfortunately, they started a war. It's a war. It's it's a war, and this is where we are.
All right. Just one last question. Has your pledge to donate $1 to the IDF for every one of these talkbackers that do a Palestinian flag, is that costing you a lot of money, or has that discouraged them from using Palestinian flags as a response to you?
It hasn't cost me anything that I'm not happy to be spending. Honestly, it hasn't cost me anything I'm not comfortable with, and these people, they if they want to be disrespectful, that's how I'm gonna, come back and make a nice donation to IDF.
All right, Michael Rappaport, thank you for speaking out, and thank you for speaking with us on I-24 News.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you guys, and I'm sending love and strength to everybody in Israel and to the Jewish community all around the world.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Michael Rappaport, fairly well-known actor in the United States. It's good to see someone, a celebrity like that, speaking
Very
up.
important as we can bring such people to hear them, to bring their voice, because what's going in other places shows us how our situation is going on the time clock more and more, closing our time to get the legitimation. On one end, we know for what we are fighting, for our justice, for our right to live in this country after the establishment of the country. By the way, I'm not agreed from the fact to make a comparison to the Holocaust as it was done in the United Nations. Quite different. I'm coming here, I will stay here, I will be strong here. I failed in protecting, but I will succeed in winning.
Eitan Dango, thank you for joining us. Now, the Hamas terror onslaught on October 7th was a massive shock to Israel. And even if Israelis mourn the victims, they are proud of the heroes in those southern kibbutzim who fought for their lives and their family and their communities until the security forces came to rescue them. Now, Israeli volunteers with vast experience in security and defense are teaching others how to defend themselves. More on that in this report.
On October 7th, I was at home watching the news. I saw what was going on in the south of the country. At first, the news was reporting a terrorist infiltration, and there was no information about the horrors that took place there. I started scrolling through social networks. I felt horrified by everything that was taking place. I used to fight in Ukraine for the Ukrainians, but even in the war there, I did not see anything like this. In my whole life, I have not seen anything like it. I could never imagine that anyone would be capable of such atrocities, decapitating people, burning people.
Dennis Desyatnik and his friend Ariel Shapiro met each other over 25 years ago while serving in the Israeli border police. They also had the chance to train abroad and used to instruct on battle tactics, teaching shooting and Krav Maga. But after the blood-filled Saturday, October 7th, they felt it was the time to share their experience with other Israelis.
First of all, we were scared for our families. We don't want anything like this to happen again, and unfortunately, it might, since the war is not over yet. And the security forces and the army do not have enough human resources. So Ariel and I decided to gather people who are against terrorism to unite them.
Dennis and Ariel formed INF, the Israeli National Force, and aimed at everyone interested in learning about sport and martial arts, first aid, and also training dogs. But what they do not teach is to use arms, as their goal is quite different.
We don't teach people to fight. We teach people how to protect themselves.
Dennis and Ariel tell people what they should have in their cars and in their shelters, and also give guidelines on the steps to be taken in case of a terrorist infiltration along the lines of what happened on October 7th.
People should be prepared to make a WhatsApp group with their neighbors, as nowadays we usually don't know who our neighbors are. Then, if they hear shooting or find out about a terrorist infiltration, they need to know how to act, instead of locking themselves inside their safe rooms. And in this case, you don't need to know how to use arms. In 2 minutes, people should be able to put on comfortable clothes in which they can run. If there's no option to take a car, people need to escape the area together with their neighbors. In the worst case, they should be ready to protect themselves with anything available: knives, sticks, pepper spray.
Dennis and Ariel do not only give practical lessons, they also teach people to be disciplined and give them a sense of confidence.
The idea of that is that people won't stay alone in the first place. They will know how to unite.
There are a lot of people texting on the social networks that they're panicking because nobody knows what to expect next, whether the war against Hamas will end soon or whether it will lead to a bigger war on different fronts.
Speaking about different fronts means different terrorist groups such as Hamas in the Gaza Strip and Hezbollah in Lebanon. But it's important for Dennis and Ariel, and especially for Dennis, who is Muslim, to stress that the fight is never against any particular ethnic or religious group.
I want to underline, we are not against the Arab population. Even in our movement, we have Arabs. You should know that there are Arabs enlisted in the Israeli army. There are Arab doctors who save our soldiers. There are Arabs, Druze, Bedouin who support the state of Israel.
For today, around 1,200 people joined the Israeli National Force. And though the main goal is to teach Israelis how to protect their homes, Dennis and Ariel say that if needed, they can join the Israeli security forces and can help in the way it would be required.
If the situation escalates, we will pass all the information about our volunteers to security forces, and they will decide where and how to use the help of our people.
It's important to be prepared to any development, but Dennis and Ariel still hope the skills they teach would not be needed in practice.
And that brings this hour of our broadcast to a close, but still stay with I-24 News and its continuing coverage as day 25 of Israel's war against Hamas and also war in the north and other fronts come to a close. Thank you for joining us.
Israel is officially in a state of war.
This is a very active scene, and we need to get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
Help us, we don't know what to do. We just don't know anything.
Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
Every time I need somebody to explain to me.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I-24 News.
À des contraventions, on s'expose à des poursuites.
Hello and welcome. I'm Yoav Limor, and this is Strictly Security, a weekly look into defense, technology, and strategic affairs, bringing you live from the Jaffa port at the end of the 25th day of the war in Gaza. Those are the pictures from Israel's south and north as tensions remain high, and the reports of the first IDF soldiers killed in battle with terrorists. We'll speak about Israel's scaled ground operation in Gaza that began this week and its first result, an IDF soldier freed from the hands of Hamas in Gaza, and discuss the evolving intelligence picture updating and changing in real time. And Iran's regional proxies are sending out constant reminders that this currently local standoff in Gaza can easily turn into a regional war. Much to talk about. Let's begin. In the last couple of hours, Israel's National Security Council Chairman Tzachi Hanegbi has spoken about progress of the IDF forces inside Gaza and about Egypt's concern that displaced people from Gaza will rush the Rafah crossing if it's opened.
The phase that is being carried out at this time is the phase of the ground activity that is taking place in the northern Gaza Strip. It is hard fighting. It involves fierce fighting. There's no fighting without a painful price. We are a warrior nation. We are determined, despite the pain, to win. Another supreme goal, as the Prime Minister defined, is to create conditions for the return of the kidnapped to their families. This is our sacred commitment as a nation to our citizens and soldiers. As revealed yesterday, the military move serves both the effort to return the kidnapped and the pursuit to destroy the enemy's military and governmental capabilities. Egypt is our friend. It has been with us in peace for decades. We understand that it is very important for her to prevent an influx of displaced Palestinians from the Strip. We are in dialogue with them. I am in dialogue with my counterparts in Egypt. It is important to us that even if this is what they are afraid of, that treatment will still be given to the wounded in the hospitals. There is a large hospital in Rafah, on the Egyptian side of the border. There is a possibility to establish field hospitals on the border of Gaza and Egypt. There are many things with which Egypt can assist those uninvolved citizens. This is our common interest.
And now I'd like to bring in our guest, former Israeli Air Defense Forces Commander, Reserve Brigadier General Tzvika Chaimovich, here in the studio, and former Israeli politician and commander of the 7th Armored Division, General Avigdor Ka'alani. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining me today. Mr. Ka'alani, I'll start with you, looking at what's going on in Gaza. It's going to be a tough battle, a tough war. How do you evaluate what's going on in there?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. It's to fight in town. It's very complicated, and you have many tunnels over there. And to come with tank and infantry, the infantry should have the ability to move between the houses, and some houses that are ready for us, of course. And tank, it's more easier to make to be near the beach very soon. But this is it take a few days. But after that, to find all the tunnels in the town, and to try to maybe to find out the forces of the Hamas and to kill them, of course, or to surround them. This is very complicated. It's more complicated than to fight armor against armor.
Yes, and you see the civilian front in Israel. Obviously, we're looking at what's going on in Gaza, Avigdor, but there is a civilian front, you know. Tens of thousands of Israel dislocated from their homes, about 10,000 Israeli practically refugees because their houses were destroyed in the Gaza surroundings. Lots of people who were kidnapped into Gaza, lots of killed, lots of missing Israelis. That's a huge front within Israel.
Look, I'm not going to apologize what happened with Gaza. I fought in '67. I was the first Israeli tank crossing the border at that time, and they hit my tank. I jumped to the second one, and they hit the second, and I dived to the third one. I fought all the day, and I was in a year on hospital. Look what happened from 67 until now. We continue to fight against Gaza. In the 7th of October, it was like peaceful at that time, what we call peaceful, of course. And they killed so many people, so many Israeli, without, we doesn't feel guilty to shoot a child and his mother together and kill them. They killed more than 1,400 people. And of course, many soldiers were killed that time. This is the time that we are asking ourselves, what's going on here? Are we going to give up? Are we going to spoil them? Are we going to continue to bring people to work in our country? What we want to do, we want to survive. We want to stay here. We don't have a spare country. We're going to stay here forever. And now is the question, who is going to stay in the area? We or them? And we didn't start the war against the Gaza Strip. We didn't start the war. We asked them to have a peace treaty between us and them. And many years ago, we took all our forces from Gaza Strip, and we are not there. Why they so hate us? And everybody know. And I can see the world that protests against Israel now. And I'm asking myself, what the world what? They want to see me in the cemetery? And what happened after that? They want me to move to another country? This is the reason that we are going to fight until that we achieve all our goals.
So, Tzvika Chaimovich, you used to command the Israeli air defense systems within the Israeli Air Force. In the last rounds, Israel tried to rely on you, attacking on one hand, defending on the other hand. This round became a war, and it looks totally different.
First of all, today we have kind of a daily reminder of the meaning of the multi-front threats or campaign. Officially, we are in war with Gaza and Hamas, but on the same time, we are fighting with Hezbollah in Lebanon, Syria, some militias in Syria, and in the last few days, I'm counting 5 different cases by the Houthis from Yemen. So this is the meaning of the multi-front threats simultaneously. By the way, let's take the Air Force for example. Where did the Air Force strike in the last 48 hours? 5 different fronts. Of course, Gaza, the Red Sea, West Bank, the Damascus and Jenin case, Syria and Lebanon. So it's kind of daily operational activities around the last 25 days. So for the Air Force perspective and the Air Defense Forces as well, it's a multi-front threat simultaneously. And if we'll take, again, the Air Defense Forces example, all the systems, Iron Dome, Davis Sling, and Arrow operationally intercepted in these 25 days. It's amazing.
So I want to touch what you've mentioned and those attacks from Yemen, especially the current one, the one that took place today. The first ones were fired directly at Israel. The Americans intercepted them over Saudi Arabia in some places, and then they learned the lessons and they make life more complicated for Israel. So the Israeli Air Force had to intercept them in most cases in the last few days, especially using the Arrow today. What exactly was fired? How complicated it is to locate such devices and to intercept them?
The case that you mentioned that intercepted by the Americans wasn't a long-range missile. It was a UAV and kind of a cruise missile. It's a UAV, but depends the velocity, the speed, and the size. But the case today, it is the first time, and it should be mentioned, kind of first times this morning. First time a long-range missiles, more than 1,500 kilometers from far south to the state of Israel. The first time that's the Arrow took operationally successfully this threat. since 2000 when we operated the Arrow. This is the first time, and the first time that we are dealing with the Houthis from Yemen. So they launched this morning a long-range mission for the category of the Shiavs, full Iranian technology, full Iranian knowledge.
And a full Iranian proxy.
Absolutely. The Houthis, they are a similar organization like Hezbollah. Same agenda, same radical organization, terror organization, control the area in Yemen, the same like Hezbollah in Lebanon. Absolutely.
And how often do you foresee it happening? I mean, is Israel going to be busy dealing with such threats from Yemen, maybe from Iraq, and maybe from Iran itself in the near future?
First of all, the Houthis leader declared today by his voice very clear, we are part of this campaign, we are part of this war, we will continue to use our weapons to help our brothers in Gaza, the Hamas. So I will suggest us to follow his to follow and listen his declaration, and unfortunately I do believe that once we'll continue deeply the ground maneuvers in Gaza, we will see these two fronts, south from Yemen by the Houthis and north from Lebanon by the Hezbollah. They will be more actively than today. This is my own assumption. Hopefully I'll be wrong, but who knows.
Now, Victor Kalani, back to you. Give me, it's a different war than the ones you fought in 67 and in 63. Obviously, an Israeli true hero. But this is more complicated since you do not fight army versus army, but you fight within many civilians which are being used by Hamas in order to put them at risk and to put the Israeli soldiers at risk, and that's much more complicated, obviously.
I agree with you. In 67, we had to attack them. After 3 weeks, we waited near the border, and they tried to destroy our country. And Nasser, he was the president of Egypt at that time, and he decided to destroy our country. We have been for 3 weeks in mobilization, and after that, in the 5th of June, we started to fight against them. In October 73, it was completely different because they surprised us. For many reasons, we didn't know what's going on, and the government didn't start mobilization that time. Now is something happened here. It's going to be a revolution in our country now. This is my feeling. I'm so disappointed what happened, but what I'm care now is about our soldiers, our kids, our grandchildren. They are operating Gaza Strip now. It's complicated because those people, Hamas people, they involved between the civilian people. They hide themselves in many tunnels all over. They use the hospital to protect themselves under the hospital, and we have to find a way, and we have the hostess, of course, we have to find a way how to operate between all our goals. And we thought, and we said that we are going to destroy Gaza and to kill all of them. And we're not going to change our mission, but it's complicated because we are people, some kind of people, they really care about civilian, and we don't want to touch them.
Victor Kalani, Tzvika Chaimovich, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. Yes, we will move on. As the IDF continues with its coordinated ground, air, and sea operations inside the Gaza Strip, it continues to target Hamas's top brass. The group's leaders are seen as the driving force behind its countless attacks and brutality, namely the October 7th attacks, while Israel has vowed to eliminate every single leader and commander behind those attacks. Hamas's top leadership remains in hiding, whether beneath the ground in Gaza or abroad. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has more.
Day 25 of Israel's war against Hamas. The IDF continues to expand its ground operation in Gaza. As the forces advance, they're met with resistance by Hamas fighters. Dozens of terrorists hiding in buildings and in underground tunnels have been killed in firefights and airstrikes. This includes the targeted elimination of Nassim Abu Ajina, commander of Hamas's Beit Lahia battalion, on Tuesday morning. Abu Ajina oversaw the October 7th attacks on Kibbutz Erez and Moshav Nativa Asara.
The army is focused on the goals of the war defined by the political echelon, the defeat of Hamas and the elimination of its leaders. After the massacre they carried out on October 7th, this organization will not control Gaza militarily and politically.
Abu Ajina is the latest in dozens of Hamas commanders targeted in Israeli airstrikes over the past 3.5 weeks. This includes Assam Abu Rakba, the head of Hamas's aerial units, Shadi Baroud, deputy head of Hamas's military intelligence, and Joad Abu Shamale, Hamas's minister of economy and top money guy. That's in addition to 4 members of Hamas's political bureau eliminated since October 7th. In total, Israeli forces have killed so far an estimated 2,500 terrorists.
We are in the middle of a war for our existence. We have set 2 goals for the war: to annihilate Hamas by destroying its military and governance abilities, and to do everything possible to bring our hostages back home. We are raining hellfire on Hamas. We have already killed thousands of terrorists, and this is only the beginning.
But Israel has yet to reach the top leadership of Hamas. The terror group's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, and the head of its military wing, Mohammed Def, are the IDF's top targets in Gaza. They're believed to be hiding deep underground in one of Hamas's hidden command centers, located under hospitals, schools, and mosques. While the group's exiled leaders, such as Ismail Haniyeh and Salah el-Aruri, enjoy their refuge in Qatar and Lebanon. And so, as Israel's ground offensive continues to deepen, so will the efforts to eliminate Hamas's top commanders, whether above ground or beneath it.
As negotiations to release 240 Israeli hostages held in Gaza stall and the ground forces slowly advance into Gaza, representatives of hostage families told the Israeli Prime Minister that they supported an all-for-all deal and believed this would have strong national support, release all Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails in return for the release of all hostages, Israeli hostages kept in Gaza. The former commissioner of Israel's prison service is with me in the studio today. Orit Adato, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's speak about this very delicate, sensitive issue. You know, the worst terrorists that Israel had to deal with, some of them sentenced not only to one life sentence, but to multiple 20, 30, 40 ones. Even imagining their release, you know, give me goosebumps.
Shiver. I would tell you, know me for years. When the exchange of Gilad Shalit to over 1,000 terrorists, I don't call them prisoners, they are terrorists, I was against it because I thought it's not reasonable. And, you know, 2 of the heads of Hamas today, Yahya Sinwar and Salah el-Aruri, were 2 of these 1,000 and some prisoners that has been released, not prisoners, terrorists. But now it's a totally different situation because we have hundreds of civilians there, and not only Israeli. There are Israelis, there are foreigners. It's not an issue only between Israel and Hamas. It's an issue between evil and we're supposed to be the good ones. Yeah. So if it was really an option and not a manipulation, even though I was against any other exchange, I would say at that time, yes, because we need them back. We have the responsibility, the state, the government, has the responsibility for bringing back all our civilians.
So if you would open the jail's doors and send something like 6,500 or 7,000 prisoners, 6,000...
To Gaza.
send them to Gaza?
Anywhere else, just to Gaza.
But why Yahya Sinwar accept that? He would say, if try to get into his mind, and I can't get into someone like him. Why accepting that? He knows that if he gets him to Gaza, the next day Israel will start killing everybody, kill him eventually. Why doing so if you were him?
That's one reason, but another reason is that now, usually, I would say that the prisoners or the terrorists or the security inmates, whatever you want to call them, are a major issue within the Palestinian society. And releasing them is really something that they are wishing for. Nowadays, when you are looking at Yahya Sinwar, what he is interested in is his survival, his and his colleagues. He doesn't care really now on the prisoners. That's why I do not believe that if he says, give us everyone and we'll give you everyone. No, they won't do that. It's just a manipulation. He knows how hard it is for the Israeli society.
He will ask more, furthermore than his own survival, his own and immunity.
No,
he will ask Al-Aqsa Mosque. He will ask a foot on the ground in the West Bank. He will ask everything.
He will try to ask everything, yeah. But, from the very beginning, don't believe him. Because if really he wants that deal, he should have done it at the first days when he was strong and the Israeli didn't get into Gaza. He's talking about it now because he feels, insecure. Things are changing. He didn't realize what will be the reaction.
So what you're saying is that Israel should avoid the deal and try to push him as strong as possible, and even maybe kill him before reaching a deal, or should try both.
I would say
efforts.
That they are doing a parallel time, both efforts, but I can guarantee you that he, by his own, will not do that deal. Maybe the mediators that are trying to speak for him and for us, and I'm speaking about the Red Cross, for example. I don't know if you have heard, but the Red Cross has written a letter to the Commissioner of the Israeli prison today that he reminds her that we have to work under international law, and we need to give.
We are the problem?
Yes, that's amazing. And they had some demands, give them medical care. Of course, we give them medical care. Yahya Sinwar has gone through an operation in his head, and we saved him. So, of course, she answered them, nowadays we cannot open our prison for your visits because it's a delicate situation. But I am sure that you are doing your best to find out what is the situation of the kidnapped.
And the cynicism is obvious.
Of course.
So I must ask you personally, you've commanded those prisons and those people, and obviously you were in charge of those people. Now, we've seen what they've done in Gaza on October 7th, beheading children, raping women, kidnapping elderly people, killing in mass killings, etc., burning people alive. How can you deal with such people?
You can't. You cannot deal with such people. That's why the Israeli government and the IDF has decided that, and we just heard it here again and again, we are going to kill them all, because these are not human beings. These are animals, and even though wild animals kills for food, not for fun. And what they have done changed the whole perception. They are not any counterpart to deal with. They are the enemy in the worst, and they are not, again, it's not between Israel and Hamas. It's between the evil and I would say, the West values in the world. They are not entitled to live anymore, because who has commanded such a massacre does not have the right to live anymore. And that's why we are fighting there.
You know, Yahya Sinwar, while in prison, used to be considered as pragmatic, someone you can talk to. I even remind you that 2 or 3 years ago, he wrote a note in his handwriting in Hebrew to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Of course,
he
he
played
learned
a game
Hebrew in prison.
He played a game with us?
Sure. He have learned us. He had many years in prison. He learned us. He studies us. He was looking from outside. He was gathering information, intelligence, and I'm not sure that he is only deceased us. He has done it for I would say, for Egypt, for Israeli Arabs looking at him. The driver that took me here is a Bedou. And he said, we have never thought that people can do that. It's not Islam. It's not. There are wild animals. They have killed Bedouins. They've killed Muslims as well. They didn't care. They've killed Thais. They've killed Nepalis. They didn't have anything to think about if it's a baby or an old woman with her nurse provider.
If you were to confront him, Yahya Sinwar, what would you do? What would you say?
I wouldn't. That time. I did it in the past, not personally. But as you have said, he wrote a letter, he wrote a note, he played us, and we are naive.
And we have to live and win. Orita Dato, thank you so much for talking to us today. A quick break for commercials, and when we return, Iran and its proxies are turning up the heat across the Middle East. Where could this lead us? Stay with us to find out.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Over 1,300 people murdered and more than 3,000 injured, and the war with Hamas continues. We bring you first-hand testimonies from the front lines, from those who survived, and all the records of the atrocities by Hamas. Follow us as Israel fights terror from the south and north. Get the inside scoop on what's going on. Only on I-24 News.
La liberación inmediata, con vida, de todos los rehenes. Jaime, Peri, Hanna, Gilboa, Dalal, Gai, Calderón,
Total país.
You're watching Strictly Security live on I-24 News. Thank you for staying with us. Let's go for some updates. Mary McAuliffe is on Israel's northern border. Mary, what is your update for this hour?
Good evening, Yaakov. So here it's been quite a few hours since we've had any activity here on the northern border, but we continue to see the pattern that we've seen over the past few weeks, which is these limited attacks by Hezbollah, reminding the Israeli army that they are there, trying to fire anti-tank missiles both into Israeli communities, but also soldiers and that military infrastructure, which is stationed along that border with Lebanon. This is what we continue to see throughout the day. A number of different fires breaking out in this area on the hillside. Behind me, these are observation posts by the IDF that have been routinely hit by Hezbollah in the past couple of weeks. And we just continue to see that. But on the Hezbollah side, we know there are a number of their fighters, dozens, who have been killed so far. And Israel is very much keeping a careful eye on this situation. We have the military also on high alert, especially as this operation is continuing in the south, to keep an eye on what the Iranian-backed proxies in the region are doing. And we do have another update from tonight from Syria. A U.S. base was once again reportedly attacked inside Syria, one of the bases housing coalition troops. So this is over the 23rd time that there have been attacks on U.S. forces in the region, and it does come, of course, as the U.S. is positioning a number of its forces, announcing today they're bringing an additional 300 troops to the Middle East, saying those won't be going to Israel, but they will be stationed in the area. They're, of course, joining the 2 aircraft carriers, which have been added to the region, coming into the Mediterranean Sea, along with their strike groups, all as the U.S. are trying to keep a careful lid on the situation with Israel, and careful negotiations also to try and prevent the situation in Gaza from spiraling into a larger regional war between Israel, U.S., and Iran and its proxies in the region, which are continuing to wreak havoc.
Yes, and what do you hear about the civil front in the north, Mary? Because we have been witnessing the evacuation of tens of thousands of Israelis. Are they about to come back? Are they about to remain away until when?
It's really the question, Yaakov. Many of them don't really know. We talked to some residents here in the area over the past couple of weeks that we've been reporting here. We know that some of them have at least been told to expect to brace for at least 3 months before returning to their homes. But those could also refer to the communities in the south. So it's really unclear right now for many of these residents. And that's why we talked to one resident in the community who's evacuated last week. There's some 49 communities which have been evacuated so far. And one of those, she told us she didn't know why she was going to evacuate because she understood the threat that was going on, but she also couldn't bring herself to pack for a week, a month, 3 months, and just really truly had no idea how long this situation will continue to unfold. But many of the residents also telling us that right now it certainly does not feel safe for them to return to the area. These communities that were evacuated are just 4 kilometers from the Lebanon border, so it's so near these fighters on the other side who continue to fire missiles, rockets, anti-tank missiles into Israeli territory, and they're saying it really does not feel safe for them to be so. So we have seen thousands who have evacuated to safer parts of the country. Again, that's difficult to say right now because all of Israel has been seeing rocket sirens over the past few weeks. We also know on the Lebanese side of the border, there have also been thousands of civilians who have also been evacuated due to Israel's retaliatory strikes in Lebanon.
Mary, thanks so much for this report. Keep safe. Thank you. The air defense system was used operationally for the first time by Israel shortly after the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen claimed to have sent drones intercepted by Israeli warplanes. The IDF confirmed to also have downed a surface-to-surface missile launched towards Israeli territory, intercepting the projectile over the Red Sea region, making it the first operational use of the air defense system. The Iranian-backed Houthi government in Yemen claimed responsibility for sending drones and saying it will continue to do so. I'd like to bring in our expert panel for this evening, Behnam bin Taleblu from the Federations of Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C., and here in Israel, Talin Bar, UAV and missile technology analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us, and Siman Shine, former intelligence officer within the Israeli Mossad. Sima, thank you as well for joining us today. Behnam, I'll start with you. Looking from the other side of the Atlantic, how do the Americans look at this war? What does it seem that the Israelis and the others are trying to achieve? And do you see a chance that the Americans will have to practically intervene, not only by intercepting missiles, but practically by using force?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you and the distinguished panel. In essence, it depends who you ask in America, and especially in Washington, within which flank of Washington. Clearly, the administration, the Biden administration, that is looking to stand with Israel both in word and in deed. But at the same time, right now, you've seen them absorb the vast majority of the Iran-backed strikes in the region, particularly in the heartland in Iraq and Syria. There's been a reported 24 attacks against U.S. positions in Iraq and Syria using drones and rockets. The U.S. has only kinetically responded one time. Obviously, Israel has a much better response ratio against Iran-backed militants, be they in Lebanon or in Gaza. But right now, political fears of a wider regional escalation, one that Iran is quite keen to play up with this kind of spreading, this geographic spread, I should say, of its ring of fire with land attack cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, rockets, mortars, and drones against the U.S. and Israel. That does seem to have, in the very short term, allowed the U.S. to move more assets into the region, both to protect itself as well as to signal resolve against Israel's adversaries. But the big question for Washington right now is there an overt trigger? Is there a clear political and technical red line? Many assume it's a more overt entry of Hezbollah into the conflict beyond using anti-tank weapons and select rockets against 20 to 40 to 60-kilometer range radiuses. But beyond that, all eyes are actually on the success of Israel's operation in Gaza, and if Iran will threaten to widen based on that success.
Yes, and Bechtel, I'm hearing that Secretary Blinken is about to arrive again in Israel this coming Friday. What is he going to say to his Israeli counterparts?
These are high-profile political visits designed to make sure both the Israeli government and the Israeli public knows that the U.S. is keenly watching and standing with the Jewish state as it seems to be surrounded by an Iran-backed ring of fire on all sides. Will these, talking points as well as the moving of more infrastructure into the region be sufficient as Iran steps up that ring of fire? I think time will tell. But these are important political signals to send to our ally in the region.
Yes, Sima Shine, once again, thank you for being with us this evening. So that's how it seems from Washington. How does it look from Jerusalem this evening? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to prevent?
So as you have mentioned at the beginning, we are our main goal is now Gaza and Hamas. We are concentrating on that. Other things are secondary. If it's Hezbollah in the northern border, we, of course, retaliate and do everything we think should be done, but that's not the main thing. The same goes for the Houthis from Yemen. It was intercepted by us. Before it was intercepted by the Americans. Some fell on the Egyptian soil. So this is, and I heard this evening that they proclaimed war vis-a-vis Israel. So this is a scene where we don't put our emphasis now. We are concentrating on Hamas and Gaza, and it looks that we are achieving a lot of success on the ground, quite paying heavy price for that, but achieving a lot. And as it was said before, we will retaliate when and if it will be needed. And I think what we see now is the decision of other militias in the region, according to Iranian order, to try and take some attention of Israel in order to say that they have come to support Hamas, but no one, and especially not the Iranians themselves, are willing to fight, really to fight for Gaza. And this is an issue that will be part of the problem that Iran will face at the end when it comes to its end, with its resistance front that it has established.
Yes, but Sima, one more question, I hear you analyze very, very clearly the situation, but if there is something that was very obvious on October 7th, it is that Israel misread Hamas intentions. It thought it is deterred, it wasn't, etc. How can we be sure that Hezbollah won't act likewise? I mean, at one certain point, today, tomorrow, within a week, change totally and attack Israel in all fronts?
That, of course, we cannot be sure, and that's the reason that Israel has has brought such big numbers of soldiers to the border, has evacuated the kibbutzim and villages, and is on alert on our northern border. My understanding, reading from, and we will hear Nasrallah for the first time on Friday in a speech, but from what I'm reading from the Iranian side as well as from Hezbollah side, I can say that they have a lot of reasons not to get into a full-scale war. It's one the reason is of course the American presence, but it is also the Israeli awareness on the ground, the fact that civilians are not on the border, the fact that the Lebanese people doesn't want a war, and we are following what is happening in Lebanon, and we hear that people are saying we don't want Beirut to be like Gaza. So I think there is a lot of pressure on Hezbollah not to open a full-scale war. At the same time, it's important for them to say that they have contributed to the war of Hamas. And at the end of the day, Hezbollah is the diamond from the point of view of Iran, and I don't think they want to lose Hezbollah for Gaza and for Hamas.
Yes, Tal Inbar joins us now. Tal, we've mentioned now and before those attacks from Yemen by the Houthis, by a few different tools. Let's analyze them. Let's look at what they have, what they fire at us, and the complexities of intercepting those efforts.
Sure. The Houthis used several types of systems, from long-range UAVs, drones, that are flying at a very, very low altitude and rather slowly, so it takes them several hours to reach Israel. They also used several cruise missiles with a jet engine. They are more speedy, if you like. We just saw several hours ago the remains of one of those cruise missiles that fell in Jordan. And then we had the incident from this morning when the Houthis fired a long-range, or actually mid-range ballistic missile with a range of roughly 1,800 kilometers to the proximity of 2,000 kilometers. And this missile, they named it Tufan. It is actually Ghadr, an Iranian ballistic missile that we know for several years. And it was just unveiled by the Houthis in a military parade last month. So we have slow-flying drones. We have more assets that they are using, cruise missiles, and at least one ballistic missile that was used today.
Yes, and let's talking about the interception itself. The first one round last week, those tools were intercepted by the Americans, the Saudis over Saudi Arabia. Then the Yemenis, the Houthis, changed the path to make life more complicated on the Americans. So Israel has to deal with them closer to Israeli shores. How complicated it is to locate them, taking into consideration what you've mentioned at the beginning of your previous answer, which is they're flying in very slow, on a low altitude, etc.?
Well, detection of slow-moving targets is rather hard and difficult because you have to use some radars that have the capability to watch those slow-moving targets. As for ballistic missiles or cruise missiles, it's a little bit easy to detect, but then again, the demonstration of successful interceptions by the United States via its Aegis ship in the Red Sea, and Saudi Arabia assets on the ground, and Israeli interceptors, including the Arrow, it is a proof of the importance of regional missile defense system, cooperation, collaboration, and some common language between the operators, at least the Americans and the Israelis. And as you know, we have practiced this for several years in joint maneuvers. So it is a joint effort. And of course, there is no such thing as a 100% defense, but no target was actually caused any damage on the ground in Israel. This is not the case in Egypt. So at least one drone was able to hit the Taba region last week. But it's a proof of concept of cooperation, and the detection of ballistic missiles could start much earlier. You don't need only radars, but you can use what the American forces is using, the detection satellites in orbit.
Yes. Sima Schein, is there any way Israel can deter the Houthis in Yemen? It's far away, it's complicated, it will take attention from Gaza and Lebanon, but still we're being annoyed from Yemen on a daily basis, and if God forbids, they might succeed.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a surprise. I can tell you that when we have been making different scenarios, much before, of course, the events that are taking place now, in different scenarios, we have put the Houthis as one of the players vis-a-vis Israel. They have said it in the past, and this is one of their slogans, and therefore it wasn't a completely surprise. What I think could be much more difficult, I think, as you heard before from Tal and Benam, the UAVs and the missiles, we and the Americans know how to handle it. When it comes to the Red Sea, to things that crossing the Bab el-Mandeb and others, that could be an issue. I'm sure that there is already a cooperation with the Fifth Fleet of the Americans, but still this is something to worry and to look upon. What also is interesting to notice is that after a year and a half of a ceasefire between the Saudis and the Houthis, part of which was also enabled also the renewal of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, we saw in the last days for the first time a Houthi attack on the Saudis, and four soldiers that were killed. I don't know if it's a beginning of a new round after this ceasefire, but it is something that we didn't see before. We have to see, but that might also be one of the ways of the Iranians to put pressure on the Saudis and on others. As you know, one of the intentions of Iran within this event with Hamas is to prevent this normalization between Israel and the Saudis, and of course the defense pact between the Americans and the Saudis. So this is just today we heard that during the visit of the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia in Washington, he has told the Americans that Saudi Arabia is continuing to be interested in normalization with Israel. So this is something that might be developed from the Iranian point of view, something that to put pressure on Saudi Arabia on one hand, and of course on Israel on the other hand. We have to look very carefully. I must tell you the issue of more than 19 attacks on Americans in Iraq and in Syria is something to follow, and we'll see if it doesn't escalate also to the Gulf in any way. So we are in a delicate situation, but I think for the time being, it's a decision on the side of Israel to concentrate on Hamas and Gaza.
Yes, so Bechnam, thanks for staying with us and being so patient. How much concerned, if at all, is the administration of Israel, getting involved with the Yemenis and might getting involved with the Iraqis and even furthermore with the Iranians, and maybe dragging the Americans into all those fronts? We are seeing the US having to attack in Syria, in Iraq, being attacked in Syria and Iraq, and Americans might pay with their lives for that. So I believe this is a reason for concern within the administration.
Well, it could be a reason for concern. Many who would believe it's a reason for concern would not look to those theaters, would not necessarily look to Iraq and Syria, because they might believe that the U.S. could quarantine that off. Yemen is a wild card. The likely place they would look to for a potential red line or a threshold for greater American involvement would be this increasing return of fire between Lebanese Hezbollah and Israel to Israel's north, the potential for a geographically divergent front, the potential restarting or the potential commencement, I should say, of a third Lebanon war does contain political ramifications for escalation. But I did mention that the Yemenis were a wild card, and I do want to go back to this and part of what the friend and colleague Tal was saying about the land attack cruise missile and the medium-range ballistic missile capability. Deterrence by denial, meaning intercepting these systems, is necessary, but it's not going to be sufficient. Why am I saying that? Because since 2017, you've had multiple Houthi political leaders talk about wanting to more overtly drag in the Houthis into any prospective Israeli-Palestinian conflict or Israeli-Hezbollah conflict. And finally, as of last week, as you know, they acted on a more than half-decade-year-old threat. And in essence, the Houthis, out of all of Iran's axis of resistance, more than Lebanese Hezbollah, more than Hamas, more than the Syrian and Iraqi militias, they are the only ones with medium-range ballistic missile capabilities and land attack cruise missiles. And they didn't even create this proxy. They co-opted it. So this really is a wild card if one of these systems does get through. And that's why I could see Israel doing, as they say in Italian, a politica del carciofi, or a politics of the artichoke one at a time approach, because deterrence by denial against such an adversary, in my view, is going to be insufficient.
Bechnam bin Taleblu, Talin Bar, and Sima Shain, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Moving on and back to Gaza, tens of thousands of targets, valuable information flowing from the interrogation room to the troops on the ground. More in this next report.
Thousands of tons of explosives have been used on the Gaza Strip in the past 3.5 weeks. As the fighting progressed, many new targets were added to the IDF intelligence target bank. In most cases, the information comes from here, from the Shin Bet's interrogation rooms. Hundreds of people, some of them members of Hamas, who possess a lot of information, were caught on that Black Saturday.
A great deal of critical, essential, and life-saving information came from these investigations. Information that also serves the army right now. Sometimes you get information from the interrogated, and within an hour, a target is marked.
These are the faces of the killers on October the 7th, but they also hold a lot of information that may save lives. From the moment they were caught, a race against time began.
Interrogating a prisoner during a war is like a ticking time bomb, since any sliver of information during war can save lives. And that can affect the outcome of the battle, or even the outcome of a battle in specific terrain.
For the investigator, there's no time to sit around and to conduct an interview. That might take days or even weeks. The time element is critical, and it's being treated appropriately.
Each person, when they're interrogated, there's some kind of basic information about him, or the unit he works in, or the organization, or the area he's working in. He's not being interrogated blindly. It can be confirmed by cross-checking everything he says with what we know, and also according to what other prisoners are saying.
And here, the Shin Bet speciality comes into play. They sit in front of those that, a minute ago, murdered, burned, and maybe raped, and now they need to make them sing, mentally break them.
In some cases, there's a problem with identifying the people, not knowing who they are. Those are people who were taught to hide their identity.
Some terrorists, when caught, started singing almost immediately, with no threats made by the Shin Bet.
It's not what it looks like in the movies. These interrogations are held by law. I would say that applying physical pressure won't necessarily bring the results needed.
No one just gives all the information they have, especially not voluntarily. You need to produce it. In interrogations, there's a saying that if a lemon was smart, it would give up all of its juice without being squeezed. Same goes for the interrogated. They don't always give you everything. And if they need a squeeze, you must squeeze them.
Most of the investigations are a chess game between the investigator and the interrogated.
The investigation is very manipulative and very psychological. The investigators are excellent at reading body language, and they can read the person being questioned. They can tell what his movements mean, what a hand movement means, and what a drop of sweat means.
But some cases are exceptional. On the first days of the war, a video was circulating on social media where terrorists were forced to listen to an Israeli children's song over and over again for hours. This was deliberate.
Playing loud music in interrogations is so they can't talk to each other, on one hand, and on the other hand, it's to not let them become relaxed and calm, but to be in a state of constant stress for the upcoming investigation.
The investigators saw the videos of the horrible crimes committed. Now they need to investigate the same people who did it.